Chapter 31. Reward? Is it this thing? King Kong was stunned for a moment. Then, he rummaged through his clothes for a while and took out an antique-looking brocade box. Hood gave it to me when I came. He said that if I meet an opponent I can't beat, I should give this to them. This is a dimensional brocade box. Back then, Mingyu said the name of this box. The dimensional brocade box was a brocade box that Yuan Ko used to store their own treasures. It didn't look big, but the space inside was not small. Could store very large things. This was the standard of every Yuan Ko boss. Opening the brocade box would give a number of spoils of war. However, the dimensional brocade box was usually dropped from the boss's body after killing it. It was unheard of and unseen for someone to take it out of their body like King Kong did. Of course, the dimensional brocade box only existed in the game. After defeating Yuan Ko in reality, it would return to dust and not a single hair would be left. You disturbed King Kong's tea because you want this box. When King Kong saw Mingyu snatch the box from his hands as if she had snatched a treasure, he immediately became unhappy. If you want this box, just say it. It's not like King Kong doesn't want to give it to you. Why did you have to touch it? You caused King Kong's ship equipment to be damaged. At the very least, you have to soak in the hot spring for a few days and nights. King Kong said a lot of words, but unfortunately, no one paid attention to him. Big sister, quickly open it and see what's inside. Do you have the thing you want? Ning excitedly shook Mingyu's hand. It seemed that she was much more eager than Mingyu. Can I? Unexpectedly, Mingyu did not open it immediately. Instead, she looked at Gohan with a questioning gaze. It seemed that without Gohan's permission, she did not plan to open it. You are the captain. Please do. After Gohan indicated that he had no objections, Mingyu finally opened the brocade box. Because the dimensional brocade box had a dimensional space fixed inside the box, it was impossible to see what was inside the box with the naked eye. One had to reach in and take out the items one by one to know. That year, Mingyu stretched her hand in and searched for a while, and took out an azure blue pill the size of a longan. This is the Sword Essence pill. Back then, Bright Moon had recognized this pill with a single glance. It was not a rare item, and would more or less drop a few in crusade missions. Essence Sword Pill Blue, tradable, not bound. Effect: permanently increases 10 quarks of sword essence after consumption. Usage limit: each player can take a maximum of 1 essence sword pill per day. Each player can take a maximum of 100 essence sword pills per day. The Essence Sword Pill was the same as the Essence Sword Pill. It was a pill that could increase the value of the Essence Sword after consumption. The only difference was that the plain Sword Pill could not be traded, while the plain Sword Pill could be traded. Many tycoons in real life were willing to spend large amounts of RMB to purchase the Essence Sword Pill in order to grow quickly in the game. Therefore, the Essence Sword Pill was quite expensive in the auction house. The Blue Essence Sword Pill was the most commonly produced type of Essence Sword Pill. Its price was relatively low in the auction house, and it had been stable at around 1,000 renminbi for decades. Above the Blue Essence Sword Pill were the Essence Sword Pill of other colors. Their price skyrocketed, and it was normal for hundreds of thousands of RMB to be sold. This is for you. That year, Mingyu did not hesitate at all. She stuffed the Essence Sword Pill into Gohan's hand. This was because, according to the previous agreement, all items that increased the value of the Essence Sword Pill would be distributed to Gohan. Gohan did not stand on ceremony. He took the Essence Sword Pill and stuffed it into his mouth. The Essence Sword points on his attribute panel instantly jumped from 109 to 119 points. What Gohan lacked the most was the Essence Sword points. Although Gohan had defeated the dragon-level Yuan Ko as an ancient sword wielder, the Sword Descends into the Abyss had used up 50 quarks of Essence Sword from Gohan. In addition, he had used the Sword Formation Curtain twice. After the battle, Gohan was left with a pitiful 5 essence sword point. A scabbard. While Gohan consumed the essence sword pill, Mingyu found another item. It was a scabbard. Common scabbard, blue snow. After storing the sword Maiden, it recovers 0.5% of the sword Maiden's durability every second. After storing it for 30 minutes, the sword Maiden will return to its peak condition. Usage restrictions. Ancient Sword Maiden and Treasure Sword Maiden. Here, take it. Mingyu handed the scabbard to Gohan. This isn't within the scope of the agreement. I don't want it. Gohan hesitated for a moment and refused. It's fine. Take it. Consider it as a gift from your big sister. Mingyu laughed heartily. If it wasn't for you, we probably wouldn't have been able to get past King Kong. I see that your Qingpin sword doesn't have a scabbard, right? Toad, Ning, and I all have scabbards. This thing is useless to us, so it's more suitable for you. A scabbard isn't worth much anyway. Mingyu had generously stated that the scabbard wasn't worth much. However, in reality, the price of a treasure sword scabbard had always been around 5,000 renminbi in the auction house. This was a few months' worth of income for most normal players. Thank you. After hearing Mingyu's words, Gohan didn't insist. At most, he would return the favor in the future. His Qingpin sword indeed needed a scabbard. Gohan inserted the Qingpin sword into the newly obtained scabbard. Mingyu had once again taken out a small item from the dimensional brocade box. It was a book, an ancient book. This is... Mingyu's mouth was wide open. She couldn't believe her eyes. She had actually taken out this item. What is it? What is it? Did you take out some good treasure? And Ning couldn't wait and stretched her head to the side of the dimensional brocade box. With just a glance, she was similarly stunned like Mingyu had been back then. Oh my god, it actually dropped. My Emperor's Sword of the Firmament. He actually managed to get the secret manual for the Heavenly Sword technique. And Ning's words were trembling. That's right, what Mingyu had taken out this time was none other than the keepsake of the strongest treasure sword, the Sword Maiden Heavenly Sword that Gohan had asked for. The secret manual of the Heavenly Sword. Military Governor, this thing, according to the agreement. Mingyu spent a few minutes to allow her rationality to return to her brain. In these few minutes, she couldn't help but have the urge to stuff the item in her hand into her dimensional pocket 3 times, then leave and end the crusade mission. She wanted to hide far away to a place where Gohan couldn't find her. However, rationality finally won over greed. She decided to follow the agreement and give this thing to Gohan. Don't, big sis, why are you giving it to him? Ning hurriedly pulled Mingyu's hand. Why are you giving such a precious thing to such an annoying guy? This is our thing. Keep it well. This thing is ours. No one will give it to us. Ning, don't say too much. Song Hama immediately refuted Ning. We've already promised Military Governor that as long as the secret manual of the Heavenly Sword is dropped, it will belong to Military Governor. This is what the 3 of us agreed to together. How can we go back on our words? Song Hama was Gohan's childhood friend after all. At the crucial moment, she still stood on Gohan's side. Oh no, it was the side of justice. Why? This is the crusade we spent money to buy. We defeated the boss. Why do we have to give all the good stuff to that guy? I won't do it. This thing belongs to our Bright Moon Sword faction. For a moment, Ning and Song Hama quarreled. Gohan didn't say a word. He silently looked at Mingyu, waiting for her answer. Shut up. Stop messing around. Ning, according to the agreement, this thing belongs to Military Governor. Mingyu loudly stopped the 2 of them from quarreling. She straightforwardly placed the secret manual in her hands into Gohan's hands. Military Governor, according to the agreement, this thing belongs to you. Mingyu didn't dare to look at the item again. She was afraid that her greed would act up and she would forcefully go back on her word. Thank you. Gohan took the token and glanced at it. Then, he threw it into his dimensional bag and said solemnly, I promise that you won't regret your choice. I believe in your promise. After handing over the item, Mingyu smiled as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Her mood became cheerful again. She continued to rummage through the dimensional brocade box for a while. Then, she could only raise her empty hands helplessly. It's gone. There are only 3 things left. 3 things are gone. And Ning pouted dejectedly. Big sister. So, the things that dropped were all given to this T guy. My surname isn't T. Gohan suddenly wanted to retort. A Heavenly Sword's secret manual. Special item. Tradable. Unbound. Dropped on death. Easily damaged. Description: a sword technique secret manual exclusive to the Sword Lady's Heavenly Sword. It can be used to practice an unpredictable sword technique. Function: collect 10 secret manuals and give them to the Heavenly Sword. You will receive the favor of the Sword Lady's Heavenly Sword. Synchronize with her. If you succeed, you will become the wielder of the Sword Lady's Heavenly Sword. Note: due to the difference in bloodline and genes, there is a certain chance that synchronization will fail. All secret manuals will disappear upon failure. Chapter 32. Legend has it that more than 1,000 years ago, there was a super war caused by humans who were bored out of their mind. This war involved a quarter of the world's countries and 2 billion people. They killed until the sky darkened, the moon blurred, and the world lost its light. In short, this war was called the Second World War by later generations. In this war, not only did a large number of humans die, countless warships sank in all kinds of strange ways. Some were sunk by cannons, some were blown up by airplanes, some were blown up by torpedoes, some sank on reefs, some crashed into their own people, and some were sunk by potatoes. With so many reasons for death, there was a warship that had gone through more than 30 battles. Not only did it come out unscathed, it had even heroically saved countless Fusang Navy soldiers. The Fusang Navy called it the Eternal Undying Bird, a unique auspicious sign, an opponent that could not be defeated, an ally that they would never want to get close to in their entire lives, an existence that surpassed all warship. She is the next ship girl that we are going to face, and also our strongest opponent, Snow Wind. Gohan and the others were on their way to the next opponent, Snow Wind's base. As they walked, Gohan told the people around him about the basic information of Snow Wind. Don't tease me. At least I, Ning, have done some research. That Snow Wind is just a destroyer, and its cannon barrel is not even 1/3 as thick as this King Kong. How can it be our strongest opponent? In my opinion, it should be our weakest opponent. We don't even need to send out the sword girl, we can just send out the ancient sword. And Ning said carelessly, "Little girl, don't say that Snow Wind is inferior to me. I don't want to be enveloped by an auspicious sign." Before Gohan could say anything, King Kong, who was a captive, could not help but shiver. He quickly expressed that he was not worthy of being compared to Snow Wind. I don't believe it. How can a destroyer be stronger than a battleship? You Yuan co-captive, don't try to lie to a Ning. A Ning will not be fooled. A Ning looked as if she was very smart, so don't try to lie to her. Alright, since you don't believe me, I'll tell you the legend of Snow Wind. As King Kong spoke, he fished out a cup of black tea from somewhere. He slowly took a sip and said leisurely, "I'm not afraid of you. That was before I became a ship girl, and before I went to the ship girl's world, I was still a normal battleship. At that time, after the outbreak of the Pacific War, Snow Gale and other destroyers and light cruisers jointly protected my 2 younger sisters, Kirishima and Birue. One day the enemy cruiser Helena spotted us. The battle began, and after 24 minutes of chaotic gunfire, we were forced to retreat. The battle ended with the enemy retreating, but we also lost 2 destroyers, 1 battleship, 1 cruiser, and 3 destroyers. My sister, Bairi, was Xiefeng's main bodyguard. Not only was she severely injured in the first battle, but she was also bombed by the U.S. military the next day. She was so badly injured that she couldn't even take care of herself. She had no choice but to sink herself, but Xiefeng was unscathed in the battle. My poor sister! An even sadder thing happened at night 2 days later. My sister, Kirishima, and my good friend, Gao Xiong, Snow Gale, and a total of 13 battleships encountered the enemy fleet again. That damn Washington hit my poor sister, Kirishima, with 9 main cannons and more than 40 secondary cannons within 7 minutes. Because of that, Kirishima and Birue sank together, but Snow Gale wasn't injured at all. A year later, Snow Gale escorted the transport fleet to New Guinea in the Bismarck Sea. Due to the enemy's continuous air raids, we lost Snow Gale, Morning Tide, Shi Jinfeng, Wild Tide, and 7 transport ships. There were also countless casualties among the humans. However, Snow Gale and the infantry battalion it was carrying didn't suffer any losses from the beginning to the end. They even rescued a large group of friendly soldiers who fell into the water. 3 months later, the enemy encountered Snow Gale again and launched a torpedo at her. However, they never expected that the torpedo would actually penetrate the bottom of Snow Gale's ship and hit the flagship's light omniscient power next to her. Another year later, the Battle of the Mariana Sea broke out. Snow Gale was supposed to go to the front line, but due to an accident during a training session before the war, her speed was halved. She was ordered to escort the oil tanker, Western Maru. As a result, most of the sisters who went to the front line sank. The Western Maru, which was escorted by Snow Gale, was sunk, but Snow Gale was still fine. Then, there was the largest battle of the Leyte Gulf in human history. I think you can guess the result. Our army sank more than 30 warships, but Snow Gale was still safe and sound. Then, the saddest story happened. At this point, an extremely painful expression appeared on King Kong's face. That day, I remember it was raining. Snow Gale and Pu Feng escorted me back to my home. On the way, we encountered a sneak attack by the damn U.S. submarine, Sea Lion, in the Taiwan Strait. At that time, I was already seriously injured in the Battle of the Leyte Gulf. I had no ability to fight back. Together with Pu Feng, we sank forever under the sea in Taiwan. Although I had sunk, the legend of Snow Gale continued. The newly born flagship, Master Yamato's sister, the aircraft carrier Shinano, refused to believe it and invited Snow Gale to escort her first voyage. In the end, it was sneak attacked by the submarine. Master Shinano only survived in that world for 20 hours before leaving us forever. Soon, it was the final battle between us and the enemy. We gathered all the remaining sisters of Fusang to protect the flagship, Master Yamato, and launched a life-and-death battle with the enemy. In the end, only Snow Gale and 3 other destroyers returned to the harbor alive. These were the last 4 destroyers of Fusang. Later, during the enemy's bombardment, they sank for various reasons. Only Snow Gale was left in that world. It was the only one out of a total of 82 destroyers. World War II ended, but the legend of Snow Gale did not. After the war, the U.S. Navy had a large surplus of ships. The U.S. Navy began to eliminate a large number of ships. All the U.S. warships that met Snow Gale were decommissioned, dismantled into iron pots and ladles, or resold to other countries. In 1947, Snow Gale sailed from Changpu Port to Shanghai. As a Japanese compensation ship, it was handed over to the Chinese Kuomintang government. It was also renamed Danyang. However, on the day of the handover ceremony, President Jiang saw the report of the People's Liberation Army's offensive. 2 days later, the Lu and Deng armies broke through the Yellow River defense line and jumped thousands of miles into the Dabi Mountains. In 1948, Snow Gale and Chongqing participated in the famous Battle of Tashan. This was the most crucial battle of the Liaoshan campaign. More importantly, Jianzhou fell, and the defeat was set in stone. Later, it was said that Chongqing no longer wanted to be with Snow Gale, so they simply revolted. In 1971, this was the last year of Snow Gale's life. President Jiang made up his mind to dismantle it. On the day the order was passed down, President Jiang's Republic of China was chased out of the United Nations. On the day that Snow Gale was dismantled, President Jiang got into an accident and fell ill. He passed away. King Kong's story went on for more than 10 minutes. Apart from Gohan, everyone else broke out in cold sweat for more than 10 minutes. This Snow Gale was too scary. Just listening to her story was enough to make people lose the will to fight with her. Sour Popsicle, why don't you have any reaction after listening to it? Don't tell me you've become so careless. Song Hama walked to Gohan's side and asked. I took a shower before coming here. Gohan gave an inexplicable answer. Finally, they arrived at the place where Snow Gale was. This was the Guardian Mansion's modification factory. Snow Gale sat at the entrance of the modification factory and quietly looked at the illusory and ever-changing clouds in the distance. Is this Snow Gale? She's clearly a little lowly. The moment Song Hama saw Snow Gale, her uncontrollable lolicon nature burst out. I don't believe this little lowly is so scary. You don't believe me? The corner of Gohan's mouth curled up slightly. That's great. Let your Jinshan out and let her have a chat with Snow Gale alone. Chapter 33. Jinshan swore to the heavens that she had never seen such a king battle, a battle that made one feel helpless, a battle that made one want to retreat or even surrender. Jinshan had originally rejected the idea of dealing with this opponent. This was because his opponent seemed to be a quiet, and weak little lowly with some autism tendencies. Looking at her pink face, small arms, petite figure, and princess dress full of delicate lace, Jinshan couldn't help but feel some pity. Bullying such a lovely little girl, is it really what a lady should do? When Jinshan persuaded herself with difficulty, she waved her sword at the little lowly, but the little lowly did not move at all and let Jinshan's sword kill her. Therefore, Jinshan closed his eyes in pain and self-blame. He could not bear to see the little lowly die under his sword. Unsurprisingly, Jinshan clearly felt that his sword had pierced into a soft body. But why? Why did his heart feel so painful? Why did he feel such intense, heart-wrenching pain? The pain was so great that Jinshan could not help but open his eyes. Sure enough, the sword had pierced his left leg. No wonder he felt so much pain, so that was why. Why did my sword stab into my own leg? Jinshan looked at his injured white and tender thigh in disbelief. The pink muscles were exposed. Also, where's my shield? Why didn't my shield block it? Jinshan, are you okay? Why did the system tell you that your durability has decreased by 12%? Your shield obviously didn't lose any energy. On the other side, Song Hama's anxious voice came through the sword mark. He simply could not understand why Jinshan would still lose his durability when his shield was intact. It's you. You used some kind of sorcery. There was no other reason that could explain this strange phenomenon. The reason must be this little lowly. Jinshan completely put away his pity and stared at the little lowly's every move with an incomparably well-prepared attitude. Xiefeng did not hurt you. You are hurting yourself. The little lowly Xiefeng said with a blank expression. Xiefeng never wants to hurt anyone. Hypocrite. Jinshan once again raised his sword. Last time, he must have closed his eyes and fell into his opponent's trap. This time, he was completely focused and would not make the same mistake. Behold my mountain suppression. Suppressing mountain slashed forward, its aura as steady as a massive mountain range. Amidst the afterimages of the sword, one could faintly see a towering mountain peak. This was suppressing mountain's basic skill, mountain suppression. Basic skill, mountain suppression. The sword Maiden draws the power of the nearby mountains onto the tip of her sword. Consumes 450 sword chi to add 5 bonus damage to her attacks and reduce the enemy's movement speed and attack speed by 20% for 3 seconds. Cooldown, 10 seconds. Seeing that Jinshan's attack was about to land on him, Xue Feng did not react at all. It was as if he did not know that a fatal attack was about to land on his small body. Hit! This time, Zhen Shan saw with her own eyes that her sword had indeed struck Xuefeng's body. However, before she could rejoice, a huge force pressed down on her shoulder out of nowhere. Zhen Shan staggered and lost his balance, almost falling to the ground. That's right, this is the mountain suppression effect. Oh my god, why did the power of mountain suppression appear on me? Zhen Shan's worldview was about to be destroyed. His attack did not land on Xue Feng, but on himself. A fresh wound appeared on his shoulder, indicating where the sword had landed. Zhen Shan, what are you doing? Why did you lose another 23% durability? You only have 47% durability left. Hurry up and come back. Song Hama was going crazy. No, I must defeat this Yuan Yen. At the very least, I must injure her once. 2 consecutive sword strikes on his body caused Zhen Shan to form a firm will. Bastard! Come back! He ignored Gohan's order to forbid the sword wielder from approaching the battlefield. He leaped out from his hiding place and rushed towards Zhen Shan's location. And ran, hurry up and stop the toad. Don't let that snow wind hurt him. Back then, Mingyu was anxious. As a sword wielder, the most taboo thing was to rush into the battlefield and expose his position. Those powerful Yuan Ko might not be able to defeat the equally powerful sword maiden, but it was not difficult for him to deal with a sword wielder who only had a shield protecting his body. Once the sword wielder's shield was broken, his weak human body would probably turn into a pile of pitiful meat paste in the face of Yuan Ko's attack. When Yuan Yen faced a powerful sword maiden, he would choose to find the hiding place of the sword wielder and directly destroy the sword maiden's body. Once the sword wielder died, the sword maiden would immediately return to her sword form and fall into a deep slumber until the next sword wielder woke her up. In real battles, a large number of sword bearers would die under Yuan Yan's strategy of capturing the leader first in order to capture the bandits. That was why Mingyu had anxiously ordered and ran to chase after Song Hama, who had rushed out to die. No need to chase him. Unexpectedly, Gohan stopped and ran from rushing out. On the contrary, he said, let's go out together and take a look at this snow wind. What did you say? Mingyu was dumbfounded. Aren't we courting death if we go out? We are not as powerful as you, and can even defeat the dragon-level Yuan Ko. If we were to charge forward, we would not be able to withstand a few strikes. With me here, no Yuan Ko below the dragon level can harm you, Gohan said arrogantly. Moreover, I think that snow wind will not harm you. She is a good child. Zhen Shan, are you alright? In 30 seconds, Song Hama, who was running with all his might, panted as he ran to Zhen Shan's side, giving him a fright. Toad, why are you here? When Zhen Shan saw the toad suddenly appear, he immediately became extremely nervous. He was deeply afraid that this Yuan Ko would suddenly explode and kill his sword wielder. Zhen, mountain. The toad panted a few times. Since you refused my order, then I will fight with you. Idiot, don't you know how to use a coercive order? I can't refuse your coercive order. Zhen Shan expressed that he did not understand. Since he had disobeyed, then he would use a coercive order that he could not resist. I, Song Hama, am a man of indomitable spirit. How could I use such an unbearable thing like a coercive order on my own sword lady? Zhen Shan, since you don't want to return to the sword, then let's fight together. Best friend. Zhen Shan was moved to the point that he suddenly called her best friend. Generally speaking, sword ladies would not call the sword wielder a close friend. They would usually recite the name of the sword wielder. Only by establishing a deep relationship with one's sword lady would the sword lady recognize one's sword wielder from the bottom of her heart. What? What did you call me? Song Hama was stunned. You called me your best friend. Did I hear wrongly? Humph. Zhen Shan's face turned red. He immediately turned around and forcefully focused all his attention on Xue Feng. There's a rock by the sea. Suddenly, the expressionless Xuefeng spoke. A rock. Song Hama and Zhen Shan looked at each other. Why did this Yuan Ko suddenly mention a rock? Tie your hair together and throw it in. It's very efficacious. Xuefeng added with an expressionless face. Tie your hair together? Throw it in? Very efficacious? Song Hama took more than 10 seconds to understand the meaning of this sentence. Her expression immediately turned into one of great embarrassment. Best friend, do you know what she means? Song Hama finally understood, but Zhen Shan was still confused. After all, she was not a real human. She possessed the rich knowledge and imagination of humans. She could guess the hidden meaning of this sentence. Nothing. She just said that there's a treasure hidden in that rock. As long as you tie your hair together and throw it in, you might be able to obtain a treasure or something. Song Hama randomly explained. Oh, then let's give it a try later. Zhen Shan foolishly believed Song Hama's nonsense. We just have to cut off our hair and tie it together? Toad, are you guys alright? Just as Song Hama was about to agree, Mingyu had already run over. Behind her, Gu Han, a Ning, and the captive King Kong walked slowly without any hurry. What's going on? Zhen Shan, why did you lose so much durability? Mingyu asked impatiently. Oh no, there's still a powerful enemy beside me. Zhen Shan suddenly remembered that the mysterious ship girl, Xuefeng, was right beside him. He immediately returned to a state of high alert. He pointed the blade in his hand at Xuefeng, but he did not dare to attack again. There's no need to be so nervous. Zhen Shan, take a break. Gohan walked to Zhen Shan and pressed her hands down. If I'm not wrong, Lady Xuefeng will not attack us. Mountain suppressing sword material. Shu steel origin. Natural, 3 kingdoms, rare, realm. Sword, not upgradable, rarity. 7th grade, upgradable, sword principle. Confucian principle Confucian characteristic. Indulges in pleasure, reduces the enemy's critical hit and kill rate. Awakening, awaken form. Sword maiden form sword wielder. Toad who ate the black chicken white phoenix pill deep sword mark. 45 minutes damage. Sword maiden form 0. 031/sword form 0. 043 defense. Sword maiden form 0. 35/sword form 0. 43 agility. Sword maiden form 0. 109/sword form 0. 126 protective shield reset time. 30 seconds durability. 100% synchronization sword element requirement. 1000 synchronization coordination time. 5 minute. First sword mark engraving. After synchronization, sword wielder will permanently increase 1000 sword element points and reputation with sword wielder by 10 points. Sword mark contract. After synchronization, damage to non-noble Yuan Ko will increase by 0.008 and defense by 0.05 basic skill. Mountain suppressing sword. Sword maiden mountain suppressing sword draws the power of the nearby mountains and adds it to the tip of her sword. Consumes 450 sword energy points and adds 5 additional damage to her attacks and slows down the enemy's movement and attack speed by 20%. Lasts for 3 seconds. Cooldown of 10 seconds. Passive skill. King's authority. After sword maiden mountain suppressing sword's shield disappears, 30% durability will be immediately restored. Advanced skill. Guard sword pavilion. Suppressing mountain consumes 500 sword energy points. Sword maiden mountain suppressing sword will hold up a city gate in front of her. Reduces the enemy's long-range attack damage by 30% for 3 seconds and has a 10% chance of completely blocking the enemy's long-range attack. Cooldown of 20 seconds. Ultimate skill. Zilong Save Me. Consumes 20% durability to summon Invincible General Zhao Zilong's sword. Sword Maiden Green Rainbow sword to fight for her for 20 seconds. Cooldown of 10 minutes. Sword Maiden Fetters. The author is too lazy to write. I know you won't read it. It's not an important Sword Maiden anyway. Sword Maiden Introduction. During the Three Kingdoms period, the sword of Shu's second emperor, Lu Chan. It experienced the life of Lu Chan from an emperor to a prisoner and was buried with Lu Chan. Chapter 34. As expected, Xue Feng didn't attack Gohan and the others. Instead, she let a large group of people, the Sword Lady, and a captive ship girl surround her. She didn't show any displeasure. Peace. Xue Feng smiled stiffly at Gohan. Don't fight. Long live peace. Yes, long live peace. Gohan smiled widely. We are here for the peace of this world. Gohan was lying through his teeth. Don't believe him. Come and have a taste. This is the most delicious thing before the apocalypse. To further express his goodwill, Gohan took out a small bag of spicy strips from his dimensional pocket. It seemed that in the eyes of people from the future, the most delicious food of 1,000 years ago was still the spicy strips. This? Xue Feng took the spicy strip and carefully tore it open. The fragrance of the spicy strip, which was tightly wrapped in the packaging, instantly filled the air. Xue Feng's cute little eyes lit up. She couldn't wait to take out a spicy strip from the packaging and put it in her mouth. Delicious. Xue Feng didn't need to say anything. Her intoxicated expression betrayed her. This expression was so tempting that King Kong couldn't resist the temptation. He moved closer to Xue Feng, took out a spicy strip from the packaging, and put it in his mouth. The next moment, he threw himself on Xue Feng and began to fight for ownership of the spicy strip. You're really something. Seeing that Gohan could win over the seemingly powerful Xue Feng with a bag of spicy strips, Mingyu was sincerely convinced by Gohan. However, she also had many questions in her heart. How do you know that Xue Feng won't hurt us? By reading. Gohan answered matter-of-factly. The book, The Last Military Governor of the Ship Girl World, has a detailed description of Xue Feng. She is a ship girl who is unwilling to fight. Even the final battle with the welfare fleet only stimulated her auspicious aura. That's why I'm sure that Xue Feng won't take the initiative to hurt us. That's not right. Then why was it clearly written in the guide that they had fought with Xue Feng before? The strategy guide also mentioned that we have to be absolutely careful of Snow Wind's torpedoes. Her torpedoes have a hit rate of more than 95%. Back then, Bright Moon didn't understand. She had also studied strategies. Many teams that were strong on paper, far stronger than her team, had been completely defeated by Blizzard after passing through King Kong. During the battle, Xue Feng could launch 8 powerful torpedoes at the same time every minute. This torpedo was extremely fast, accurate, and had a high accuracy rate. Even if the scholarly Sword Maiden had a powerful shield, her shield would shatter after taking 2 or 3 torpedoes, and her body would be injured. If the fragile Killer Path Sword Lady was hit by a torpedo, her shield would explode along with her durability. Out of the more than 200 crusade missions that had been recorded, 40% of the squads had died at Snow Wind's hands. The other 50% had directly knelt before King Kong, not even getting to see Snow Wind's face. That was why back then, Bright Moon couldn't understand why Snow Wind, the biggest obstacle in this instant's dungeon, would become a peace-loving darling here. That's because we have entered a special crusade mission plot. Gohan glanced at King Kong. Ever since we captured King Kong, we have entered a special crusade mission plot that no one has ever encountered before. A special crusade mission plot that no one has ever encountered before? What does that mean? As Bright Moon mulled over this sentence, she gradually had a bad premonition. It means that this is a brand new crusade mission, a crusade mission plot that no one has ever encountered before, one that left behind a strategy. In other words, congratulations, Miss Bright Moon, we are making history. The first crusade mission plot that no one had ever attempted before was indeed making history. I never had the extravagant hope of making history. It's more convenient to follow the path that others have already taken. Bright Moon wasn't interested in making history at all. It is indeed more convenient to follow the path that others have taken. However, the first person to clear this patch of thorns will also receive some additional rewards. Gohan paused for a moment and looked into Bright Moon's eyes. For example, the item that you want. The drop rate will be at least 10 times higher when you clear it for the first time. Gohan's words made Bright Moon's eyes instantly brighten up. It was as though a few 100-watt light bulbs had been installed in her eyes. Her entire body was filled with energy. You're right. What should we do next? Next? Gohan turned to look at Snow Wind, who was trying her best to protect her spicy strip. Of course, we'll capture her. Capture her? Bright Moon of that year was stunned. She looked at Xuefeng, who was still protecting her spicy strips despite being pinned down by King Kong, and said in a daze, "Didn't I already capture her?" "She was captured by the spicy strip. It has nothing to do with us." Gohan spread his hands. "Look at King Kong's state. She can no longer be attacked. Snow Wind is still in a state where she can attack at will. Then continue to attack her," Bright Moon said without hesitation. "For victory, our victory. Go ahead. Snow Wind will never attack us. Miss Bright Moon, you can attack her at will. Just be careful not to hurt yourself." Gohan's tone was indifferent, but the meaning behind his words caused Mingyu to be stunned. She thought back to the 2 swords that Jin Shan had used to inexplicably damage her durability. There must be more to it, and if she did not understand it clearly, Mingyu would not be willing to attack recklessly. "Hey! Little brother, do you still have the red, oily, thick, and stick thing that you gave to Snow Wind?" Suddenly, the captive King Kong appeared between Gohan and Bright Moon. He began to shamelessly ask for the spicy strip. "Yes, but that's our dry rations. I can't give it to you," Gohan slyly said. Logically speaking, no one in this world would eat spicy strips as dry rations. "About that," King Kong rolled his eyes. "You were talking about how to capture Snow Wind, right? I have a lot of information about Snow Wind. If you want to capture Snow Wind, King Kong's information is essential. With King Kong's information, you'll be able to avoid a lot of detours." King Kong patted his chest, trying hard to boast about the value of his information. "That's fine provided that your information is true. Don't worry. In our Shipgirl world, in our Poseidon Empire, I, King Kong, never lie." King Kong did not lie in the Shipgirl world. She usually said stupid things. "Here you go." Gohan placed a pack of spicy strips in King Kong's hand. King Kong tore it apart impatiently, grabbed 3 sticks, and put them into its mouth. It said intermittently as it wolfed down the stick. "Snow Wind's fighting skills are average. Other than her torpedoes, her other cannons are not as good as my hand cannon. But she doesn't rely on these things. Her most powerful skill is her exclusive ability, Auspicious Halo. To be honest, when Snow Wind activates her Auspicious Halo, no one except Snow Dragon is her match, not even Yamato's boss. The Yamato that King Kong mentioned was the strongest battleship of World War II. In the Shipgirl world, Yamato was the flagship of the Japanese Allied fleet. King Kong's direct superior, it was known as one of the most powerful shipgirls. Auspicious Halo? This was the second time Bright Moon heard this name. The first time was from Gohan. "That's right. You don't know how powerful this Auspicious Halo is. As long as it's activated, Snow Wind can dodge all kinds of attack. What cannons? Lightning strikes, impact, and that sword technique of yours, as long as it's an attack, it's impossible to hit Snow Wind. It's okay if you can't hit her, but the scariest thing is that Snow Wind can return all the attacks back to the attacker. She can also ignore armor and defense. There was once that slut, Iahua, didn't believe it and chased after Snow Wind. In the end, after firing 3 cannons, all the attacks were returned. Iahua's clothes were blown to pieces. That was hilarious. Iahua was the vice flagship of the United States Allied fleet that was on par with the Japanese Allied fleet. In other words, it was slightly stronger than the Yamato, So that's how it is. No wonder Jinshan didn't suffer any damage when he attacked himself with 2 swords. So it's because of this auspicious halo. Bright Moon immediately confirmed Jinshan's situation. She no longer had any doubts about King Kong's information. If we want to deal with this auspicious halo, we must. Bright Moon pondered for a long time, but she still couldn't find a solution. This auspicious halo was simply unsolvable. Any attack could be reflected back to the attacker's defense. How was she supposed to fight with that? However, just because she couldn't think of a solution, it didn't mean that the man beside her couldn't think of one. He must have a solution. Bright Moon looked at Gohan expectantly. Military Governor, what do you think? I do have a solution. The Admiral nodded, and Ming Yu of that year immediately relaxed. As expected, this man was still very reliable. How about we kneel down and beg her to be our captive? Gohan said. Yuan Ko's name, Snow Wind. Level, Desolation. World of 2-dimensional, Shipgirl World. Appearance Dungeon, None. Appearance Crusade Mission, Jinyuan Garrison Crusade Mission. Health points, 3 stars. Attack, 4 stars. Agility, 9 stars. Cannon, 1 star. Ability, famous for its auspicious signs. It doesn't need to make any movements to kill its enemies invisibly. Ultimate skill, Thunderfish Phoenix Dance. Auspicious Halo, Peaceful Home Introduction. The first 2 chapters are very clear. The author won't make up the number of words. It's best not to hurt Snow Wind. Otherwise, you'll have to face your own wrath. Chapter 35. No way. Xuefeng shook his head forcefully. Xuefeng promised little sister Xuelong that he would guard this place well. He definitely cannot be captured by others. Although Gohan did not really kneel down, he still shamelessly sat beside Xuefeng and suggested the idea of making Xuefeng his captive. Of course, this was rejected by Xuefeng in a serious manner. Seeing that he had received an unexpected rejection, Gohan was not discouraged, and even winked at Enran who was beside him. F***ck. Why would I do such a thing? Thinking back to what Gohan had secretly told him just now, Enran was extremely unwilling. She was a lady from a noble family, a beautiful girl with a bright and beautiful face. How could she do such a shameless thing? Enran stood on the spot, extremely hesitant and conflicted. Seeing this situation, Ming Yu unceremoniously poked Enran's back. I understand. Seeing that Big Sis had sacrificed herself without hesitation, Enran couldn't help but feel sorrow in his heart. His legs went soft, and he knelt on the ground, hugging Xuefeng beside him. His tears fell uncontrollably, like a waterfall, pouring down from his eyes. Miss Xuefeng, Enran, I'm so pitiful. Enran hugged Xuefeng's arm tightly. Miss Xuefeng, Enran's neighbor's father's grandfather has a terminal illness, and is about to die. Miss Xuefeng, please do a good deed and save Enran's family. He is a good person who watched Enran grow up. Xuefeng. I don't know how to treat illnesses. Xuefeng was hugged by Enran, and was at a loss for what to say. Miss Xuefeng, you don't know, but the doctor said that as long as we succeed in our crusade, we will be able to obtain a special medicine to treat this terminal illness. Miss Xuefeng, you are a merciful living bodhisattva, please let us go and be our captive. Speaking of which, was a terminal illness with a special medicine still a terminal illness? After all, Xuefeng was still a kind-hearted child who pursued peace. Being hugged by Enran who was crying to death, he immediately felt unwell. His originally unyielding and firm attitude also gradually showed signs of relaxing. Sneakily, Mingyu moved closer to Gohan's ear and whispered worriedly, Hey, Enran's acting is so terrible, is it really okay? It's fine, this child is silly, I can't tell. As long as Enran cries, that's enough. Gohan replied shamelessly. I didn't expect Enran to have the ability to cry. You don't know, this was trained by a Ning when she was young. just based on her crying skills. Her parents have never rejected any of her requests. Mingyu of that year said proudly. It's not like you're the one crying, what are you so proud of? Very good, Snow Wind's attitude has loosened. It's time for King Kong to make his move. Guhan then took small steps to King Kong's side and gently nudged her waist, indicating that it was her turn to make a move. King Kong pressed the 5 packs of spicy strips in his clothes and tried his best to put on a fake sad expression as he said to Xiefeng, Sister Xiefeng, look at this little girl. She's so pitiful. She did so much for a neighbor who had nothing to do with her illness. It's so touching. Let's help her. Look, I took the initiative to be captured by them. King Kong cleverly explained why he was captured. But, Xuefeng promised Xuelong. Xuefeng must keep his word. Xuefeng was still unwilling to be captured. You did promise Xuelong, but you also promised His Majesty, Xuelong said. Xuefeng was still unwilling to be captured. It's true that you promised Xuelong, but you also promised His Majesty, Sea Emperor. Isn't it more important to protect your life? King Kong pulled out Sea Emperor as a shield. Xuefeng was still hesitating. How about this? King Kong patted Xuefeng on the shoulder. We will follow His Majesty's orders. Stand still and don't resist. Don't use any skills other than the auspicious aura. Let these people attack you. If these people can't hurt you, then forget it. If someone can hurt you, then surrender and become a prisoner. How about that? King Kong was indeed talented as a traitor. All right. Xuefeng couldn't resist Ning, who was hugging him and crying, and King Kong's persuasion. Xuefeng agreed to this shameless surrender condition. Next, Guhan and the others only needed to break Xuefeng's auspicious aura and successfully injure Xuefeng. Then, they would be able to capture Xuefeng. The first to attack was Ming Yu's sword Maiden, the skin-shattering sword. She had been recuperating in the scabbard for more than half an hour and had recovered to her peak state. Although she knew the specific attributes of Xuefeng's auspicious aura from Mingyu, the skin-shattering sword did not think much of it. In her knowledge, there was no enemy that the killing path sword Maiden could not break or hit. I'll get rid of you with one skin-shattering sword. After getting the promise that Xuefeng would not resist, the skin-shattering sword swaggered to Xuefeng's side without dodging and used the skin-shattering sword. Under the gaze of the skin-shattering sword, her 2 swords had indeed pierced Xuefeng's body. However, in the next second, a whole piece of skin on the skin-shattering sword's stomach was minced into meat paste. System: Sword Maiden's skin-shattering sword's durability -18%. The skin-shattering sword looked at her wound and her 2 swords in disbelief. She had clearly seen herself piercing her opponent's body. Why was she the one who was injured? Take my ultimate move, Bloody Sky. I must. Before the skin-shattering sword could finish her sentence, her entire body exploded, as if it had been installed with mini-bombs. System: Sword Maiden's skin-shattering sword's durability -81%. Warning: remaining durability is 1%. Sword Maiden's skin-shattering sword cannot withstand a second attack. Please return your swords within 3 seconds. Please return your swords within 3 seconds. Skin-shattering sword, come back. In the game, in order to prevent the sword maidens of the sword wielders from being killed instantly by powerful enemies, the sword maidens would be given emergency protection with 1% durability for 3 seconds. They would give the sword ladies a 3-second emergency protection with 1% durability. As long as the wielder could return the sword lady to the scabbard within 3 seconds, the sword lady's life would be saved and she would not be broken. Hence, the skin-shattering sword that had just recovered returned to the scabbard to recuperate after being active for less than 30 seconds. Seems like this auspicious aura is completely immune to normal attacks. Crimson Blood Demon, use layers of shadow later. The next to attack was Ning's sword maiden, the Crimson Blood Demon. After witnessing the tragic story of the skin-shattering sword, Ning rationally put away the thought of letting the Crimson Blood Demon use normal attack. Instead, she let the Crimson Blood Demon use her ultimate move, Layers of Shadow. Ultimate skill. Layers of Shadow. The Crimson Blood Demon will split into 4 clones. Each clone has half of the Crimson Blood Demon's HP and half of the Crimson Blood Demon's attack power. After appearing for 10 seconds, the Crimson Blood Demon will immediately explode, dealing 5 times the damage of its attack power to surrounding enemies. Consumes 30% durability and 1000 sword chi. Cooldown 5 minutes. The Crimson Blood Demon's trace skill was an AoE skill that self-destructed. Moreover, the Crimson Blood Demon did not need to engage in close combat. Hence, after the Crimson Blood Demon used her ultimate skill, she ordered the 3 clones to surround Snow Gale while she ran for her life away from Snow Gale. The further away she was from Snow Gale, the better. According to Ning, since she was so far away from Snow Gale, it was impossible for the Crimson Blood Demon to return to her, right? 10 seconds later, the Crimson Blood Demon was more than 500 meters away from Snow Gale. Meanwhile, her 3 clones could no longer suppress their blood chi and exploded at the same time. Unlike the explosion of the shipgirl's cannon, the Crimson Blood Demon's self-destruction did not cause any movement or sound. There was only a huge burst of blood mist in the air. Then, like an atomic bomb, it formed a beautiful mushroom cloud. However, the mushroom cloud was not next to Snow Gale. Instead, it was next to the Crimson Blood Demon, who was thought to have escaped far away, 500 meters away. System: Crimson Blood Demon's durability has been reduced to 99%. Warning: remaining durability is 1%. Crimson Blood Demon is unable to withstand the second attack. Please withdraw your sword within 3 seconds. Please withdraw your sword within 3 seconds. Crimson Blood Demon Sword. Game over. Crimson Blood Demon Sword. Material: Demon Iron Origin. Natural, Tang Dynasty, Rare, Level. Treasured Sword, unable to advance. Rarity: First Grade, Upgradable. Sword Dao. Demonic Path characteristics. Cold and Merciless. For every 10% durability lost, the attack ratio increases by 0.05. Awakening, Awakened. Form: Sword Maiden Form. Sword Wielder, Peaceful Lake. Deep Sword Mark, 9 carvings. Damage: Sword Maiden Form 0.41/Sword Form 0.53 Defense. Sword Maiden Form 0.38/Sword Form 0.44 Agility. Sword Maiden Form 0.139/Sword Form 0.159 Protective Shield Reset Time: 40 seconds. Durability: 100% Synchronization Sword Element Requirement: 1000 Synchronization Time: 5 minutes. Initial Sword Mark Engraving. After synchronization, the wielder's sword essence points will be permanently increased by 1000 and the wielder's reputation will be increased by 10. Sword Mark Contract. After synchronization, the wielder will permanently lose 50 durability points and increase 500 quarks of sword element point. Basic Skill: Merciless Magic. Crimson Blood Demon's attack has a chance to cause the enemy to lose 100 points of HP and recover 50 points of shield energy. Passive Skill: Torrential Massacre. In battle, every time the enemy is killed, the attack strength increases by 10%. Can be stacked up to 3 times. Advanced Skill: Crimson Blood Mist. Consumes 3% of the wielder's durability and 500 sword aura to form a blood mist. The enemy's movement speed and attack speed in the blood mist will decrease by 30%, while the wielder's movement speed and attack speed will increase by 10%. Ultimate Skill: Layers of Shadows. Crimson Blood Demon will split into 4 clones. Each clone will have half of Crimson Blood Demon's HP and half of Crimson Blood Demon's attack power. After 10 seconds, Crimson Blood Demon will immediately explode and deal 5 times the damage of its attack to the enemies around it. consumes 30% durability and 1000 sword aura. Cooldown time 5 minutes. Sword Mark Fetters. The author is too lazy to write. I know you guys won't read it. It's not an important sword maiden anyway. Introduction. Frowny face. The sword of the demon lord of the Tang dynasty, Shi Zhishuan. However, Shi Zhishuan did not seem to like it and buried it in a nameless valley. It seems to be because the person he loved the most accidentally died under this sword. Chapter 36. Setting Sun is the only one left. Following the defeat of the Scarlet Blood Demon and Jin Shan, the only one who could hurt Xuefeng now was Setting Sun, the famous sword-rank sword maiden. As a sword maiden of a higher realm, Setting Sun's power might be able to break through Xuefeng's auspicious halo. Back then, Mingyu drew Setting Sun from her scabbard and infused her sword essence into her sword. Starlight flashed, and Setting Sun's figure appeared in the Jinyuan Garrison punitive mission map for the first time. I, Setting Sun, am willing to strike down all the light in the world for you. Greetings, Lady Mingyu. As soon as Setting Sun appeared, she knelt before Mingyu with a standard knight's salute. She wore the armor of a general of the Han dynasty, and it was especially dazzling. In the world of thousands of sword maidens, Sunset Sun was famous for having a good reputation. She was loyal, reliable, loved the weak, was eager to help others, generous, and treated others kindly. She was an excellent knight who abided by the 8 honors and 8 disgraces. Are you Setting Sun's opponent? After receiving Ming Yu's order, Setting Sun walked to Xuefeng with an apologetic expression. Setting Sun feels deeply remorseful that I had to attack such a cute child. However, since this is an order from a close friend, Setting Sun will definitely carry it out. I'm sorry, little Xuefeng. Setting Sun's apology was sincere. However, when Xuefeng heard the word little Xuefeng, the usually expressionless little girl's eyebrows twitched uncontrollably. Oh no! Seeing this, Gohan felt bitter. I forgot to remind them that Xuefeng hates people calling her little Xuefeng. I hope this Setting Sun won't end up too badly. If I have to make a move, then Setting Sun will only use one strike. Little Xuefeng, please receive Setting Sun's hatred of the Golden Crow. The blade in Setting Sun's hand instantly ignited with a weak golden flame. However, this weak flame should not be underestimated. This was the flame of the legendary divine bird of the sun, the Golden Crow. Even the outer layer of the flame had already reached 6,000 degrees Celsius, the same temperature as the surface of the sun. Ultimate skill. Flames of the Golden Crow. The Setting Sun Sword Maiden activates the power of the Golden Crow in her body, forming a flame that can burn everything. All creatures that come into contact with the flames will receive a fixed damage of 500 points per second, regardless of their tier. Damage dealt to creatures with the frost, darkness, and chaos attributes will be doubled. Duration: 15 seconds. Cooldown: 30 minutes. If it is the Setting Sun, it can definitely hurt this snow wind. Seeing the Golden Crow fire on the blade of the Setting Sun sword, Mingyu of the past suddenly said, "Why do you say so?" Gohan asked. Because the Setting Sun's Golden Crow fire has fixed damage that ignores cultivation level. Back then, Bright Moon's eyes were filled with confidence. Fixed damage means that it ignores defense, resistance, rebound, and everything that can stop it from burning. Even if the Emperor's sword was here, it would definitely receive 500 points of damage after taking a blow from my Setting Sunday. How could a mere halo of wind block the Setting Sun's Golden Crow fire? That sounds reasonable. Gohan patted Bright Moon's shoulder. His face that was covered in fat scars moved closer to Bright Moon's fair and flawless face. How about we make a bet? I bet that your Setting Sun will not be able to hurt a single hair on the snow wind. What do you want to bet? Being so close to Gohan, Bright Moon's face suddenly blushed. For some unknown reason, Mingyu's heart began to thump wildly, as though she had returned to her teenage years. How about 100,000 RMB? Guhan opened his mouth and asked for 100,000 RMB. There was no other way. Right now Guhan was too short of money. If he wanted to crazily increase his sword essence points, the fastest way was to spend a huge sum of money to buy tradable sword essence pills from the auction house. If he wanted to become an ancient sword wielder in reality, he had to obtain 9,000 quarks of sword essence in the game. If he relied on sword essence pills to obtain these 9,000 quarks, he would need to spend tens of millions of RMB. I do have 100,000, but what are your stakes? Bright Moon of that year replied while trying her best to calm her blushing face. How about the secret manual of Heavenly Sword? Of course. However, if you put it in the auction house, it would be worth at least 1,000,000 RMB. Are you sure you want to bet with me? Yes, so you've earned it. Hurry up and make your decision. Your setting sun is about to attack. Deal. Setting Sun, who was standing opposite the snow wind, had no idea that her sword wielder had shamelessly used her as a gambling partner and made a shameful monetary deal with Guhan. She was concentrating all of her willpower on the blade of her sword, wanting to make the most perfect strike. Take this. Setting Sun's heroic eyes widened as she concentrated all of her aura on the blade of her sword. The blade drew a perfect arc in the air and finally hit the snow wind's chest. Success. Bright Moon revealed an expression of extreme joy. This time, Setting Sun's sword did not inexplicably slash back at her. Instead, it had truly struck the snow wind's body. This meant that Setting Sun had indeed hit the target. Excuse me. Setting Sun elegantly sheathed her sword. Little Snow Wind, please abide by your agreement with Lady Bright Moon and admit defeat. What? Snow Wind's voice was calm and innocent, as though he did not know what had happened. What are you asking? Setting Sun frowned. Setting Sun hit you. Please be like a knight and abide by your promise, Little Snow Wind. Did you hit the Snow Wind? Snow Wind asked in confusion. Humph. Look at your body, Little Snow Wind. My golden crow fire is still burning on your body. Setting Sun was right. At this moment, a golden crow fire was burning happily in the Snow Wind's chest. This was proof that Setting Sun had hit the Snow Wind. Fire did not touch Snow Wind. Snow Wind said word by word. This is not possible, my golden crow fire clearly. Setting Sun's words were stuck in her throat. Even though she could not believe it, but at this moment, Setting Sun's eyes clearly conveyed an image to Setting Sunday. That golden crow fire did not touch the Snow Wind's body at all. It floated a few centimeters from her clothes and burned in the air. It shouldn't be like this. Setting Sun took a few steps back in disbelief. Her golden crow fire had failed? In the next moment, something that Setting Sun could not accept happened. The golden crow fire floating on the Snow Wind's body suddenly grew more than 10 times its original size, as though someone had injected pure oxygen into it. It immediately turned into a large ball of fire. This ball of fire spun once around the Snow Wind's body. Then, like a flying machine that broke the speed limit of the universe, it left the orbit around the Snow Wind and sped towards its original owner, Setting Sunday. What really happened? The Sunset Sun carried this unwilling question as he was smashed by his own golden crow fire. From head to toe, his originally white body instantly became as terrifying as charcoal. System: Sword Maiden Setting Sun's durability minus 99%. Warning: remaining durability is 1%. Sword Maiden Setting Sun cannot endure a second attack. Please immediately withdraw your sword within 3 seconds. Please immediately withdraw your sword within 3 seconds. Famed sword level Sword Maiden Setting Sun failed. Weakly putting the Setting Sun sword that had turned into a black metal sword back into its sheath, Mingyu of that year stumbled a few steps and almost fell to the ground. Even her last hope, the Setting Sun sword, had failed. Mingyu of that year could not find any Sword Maiden that was a match for this terrifying Sword Maiden Snow Wind. What is it? losing 100,000 RMB to me, and you are so distressed? Guhan walked behind Ming Yu of that year, and used his body to support Ming Yu's wavering body. It's just 100,000 RMB, I can still afford to lose. Ming Yu of that year closed her eyes helplessly. But this mission has already failed. I really can't think of any other way to get that thing. You admit defeat just like that? Guhan smiled. I haven't gone up yet, have I? Don't joke around, you cannot break Snow Wind's auspicious halo. Ming Yu of that year opened her eyes and pushed Guhan's body away. No matter how good your sword skills are, to the point that they surpass all previous sword masters, that is just sword skills. How can pure physical damage break Snow Wind's auspicious halo? This is impossible. How will you know if you don't try? Guhan took out the Qinpin sword on his back and slowly pulled it out of its sheath. Thank you for your sheath, I like it a lot. The setting sun sword material. Tempered steel origin. Natural, 3 kingdoms, rare, realm. Famed sword, unable to evolve, grade. 8th grade, upgradable, sword path. Martial path characteristic. Vigorous in old age. As the battle goes on, all attributes of setting sun sword will increase by 1% every 10 minutes. Awakening. Awaken form. Sword Maiden form sword wielder. Ming Yu of that year deep sword mark. 20 minutes damage. Sword Maiden form 0. 060 / sword form 0. 070 defense. Sword Maiden form 0. 75 / sword form 01. 08 agility. Sword Maiden form 0. 205 / sword form 0. 217 protective shield reset time. 40 seconds durability. 100% sword element synchronization point requirement. 10,000 synchronization time requirement. 10 minutes, initial sword mark engraving. After synchronization, it will permanently increase the sword wielder's sword essence points by 10,000 and the sword wielder's reputation by 100 points. Sword mark contract. After synchronization, the accuracy of all sword ladies belonging to the wielder of the Luo Ri sword increases by 20%. Basic skill, great shot. Consumes 10,000 sword chi to release 8 sword chi from a distance. Each sword chi will cause 700 damage. Cooldown of 30 seconds. Passive skill, reverse strike. During battle, every attack has a certain chance of triggering a second attack. This attack will definitely hit. Advanced skill, Eagle's Eye. Consumes 10% of user's durability to summon the Eagle's Eye. All allies within range will have a 30% increase in hit rate. Lasts for 1 minute. Cooldown of 10 minutes. Ultimate skill, Golden Crow's Flame. Sword Maiden Setting Sun will activate the power of the Golden Crow in her body to form a flame that can burn everything. All creatures that come into contact with the flame will receive 500 fixed damage per second regardless of tier. Damage dealt to creatures with cold, dark, and chaos attributes will be doubled. Lasts for 15 seconds. Cooldown of 30 minutes. Sword Mark Fetters. Best Friend. When fighting with Green Rainbow Sword, all attributes will increase by 20%. Undefeatable Enemy. When fighting with Heavenly Sword, defense will increase by 0.5. Meet the Lord. When fighting with dual swords, Vigorous in Old Age effect will increase by 100%. All attributes will increase by 1% every 5 minutes. Ruling the World. When fighting with Zhong Mao Sword, skill cooldown will be reduced by 30%. Chapter 37. Do you want to fight with Xuefeng too? When Xuefeng saw Guhan standing in front of her and recognized him as the human who had just given her delicious spicy strips, she immediately felt a little sad. Yeah, there's no other way. If I don't capture you, Anrant's neighbor will die in the outside world. Guhan said with a sigh. It's useless, you can't hurt Xuefeng. Xuefeng shook her cute little head and said gloomily, Do it. And Guhan nodded and walked to Xuefeng's side. He patted her cute little head and said, I really can't bear to hurt you, little sister Xuefeng. Actually, I prefer to call you Danyang. Xuefeng, Danyang, both are fine. To be honest, Xuefeng didn't really like others calling her Danyang. Hey, stupid human, give up. You can't hurt Xuefeng. Seeing that Gohan did not make a move, King Kong immediately muttered, If you hurt Xuefeng, I, King Kong, will be your horse. I'll do it now. You don't have to worry. Gohan waved at King Kong, then turned around and faced Xuefeng with his back. Gohan's actions made the group of onlookers very strange. What was going on? Why was he facing Xuefeng with his back? Everyone wished that they could grow a dozen eyes and stare at Xuefeng's every move, successfully attacking Xuefeng's body. Why did Gohan turn his back and not look at Xuefeng's movements? Hey! Sour Popsicle, are you scared out of your wits? Face her face. Face her face, you bastard! Song Hama yelled, trying to get Gohan to turn around. What an idiot! And Ning mocked without holding back. However, she wasn't mocking Gohan, but a certain loud fellow. Don't argue anymore. I think that the commander must have a deep meaning for doing this. Bright Moon stopped Song Hama and a Ning's quarrel. After thinking for a while, an idea instantly jumped into Bright Moon's mind. I understand. Bright Moon clapped her hands and said excitedly, I understand. I understand now. Big sister, what did you understand? Tell us. Song Hama asked in confusion. Can't you see? Actually, this snow wind didn't rely on some *T halo to dodge our attacks, but an illusion. Bright Moon said with certainty. Illusion? Song Hama and Ning looked at each other, as if they had comprehended something. That's right, it's an illusion. The snowy wind looks like it's right in front of the sword ladies, and the sword ladies look like they're stabbing at the snowy wind, but it's all fake. The snowy wind has confused their eyes and senses, that's why they ended up hurting themselves. The more Mingyu explained, the more excited she became. Back then, Mingyu's words had moved Song Hama and Ning, and they had also been convinced by this explanation. Big sister is right. I also understand now. That is indeed an illusion. Song Hama yelled, that's why Sour Popsicle turned his back to Blizzard. That's because Blizzard's position is fake. It's all fake. Who knows, Blizzard might be right in front of Sour Popsicle at this very moment. But how did the military governor know that Blizzard's real position is in front of him? And Ning asked in confusion. You don't know this. When Sour Popsicle taught me how to practice the sword, he told me to never trust my eyes and brain. I have to trust my sword. Your eyes and brain can lie to you, but your sword won't. Song Hama used the tone and attitude of a homeroom teacher to educate Ning. It was rare for Ning to not refute Song Hama. Instead, she asked, What do you mean by that? Can you explain it? Cough cough. I haven't understood it yet, but Sour Popsicle said that I have good comprehension. I'll be able to understand it in my next life. Most people won't be able to understand it even after 10 lifetimes. Song Hama's words made Ning roll her eyes. She must have been blind to think that this stinky toad could understand such a profound principle. Don't talk. Look, the military governor is about to make his move. Back then Bright Moon said excitedly. At this moment Gohan, who had his back facing Blizzard, had already raised his sword high up in the air. Do you also think that Blizzard used an illusion? Suddenly Blizzard, who was behind Gohan, asked. Idiot, your voice is too loud, Xuefeng heard it. This is bad, Xuefeng is on guard. The Admiral's plan has been completely destroyed by you. And Ning stomped on Song Hama's foot hatefully. Song Hama, shut up, don't talk. You have to believe in the military governor's ability. Back then Bright Moon seemed to have become a fan of Gohan. No, you didn't use an illusion. Gohan shook his head and said with certainty, I know that your real body is there. There is no illusion. Then why? Why did you turn your back to Blizzard? Blizzard's cold face finally showed a hint of confusion. Can you come closer? I'll tell you if you come closer. Gohan was like a wretched uncle who was seducing little girls with lollipops. Logically speaking, little girls usually had no resistance to a wretched man's lollipop. Therefore, Blizzard obediently took a few steps forward and was less than a meter away from Gohan. It's still a little far. Closer. Gohan continued to seduce Blizzard. Is this okay? Blizzard took another step forward and was less than half a meter away from Gohan. One more step, one more step. Under Gohan's seduction, Blizzard unconsciously took another step forward, causing Blizzard's flat chest to almost stick to Gohan's back. I can't go any closer. If I go any closer, I'll touch you. Blizzard frowned. Okay, that's enough. I'll tell you why I have to turn my back to you. Gohan said this with a smile. However, the next second, the Chinpin sword that he had raised high suddenly slashed down violently. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. Intense pain suddenly surged into Blizzard's brain. She staggered a few steps back, and her small face scrunched up in pain. She clutched her stomach with one hand, and from the gaps between her fingers, a steady stream of fresh blood flowed out. Blizzard was bleeding. She was injured. System: Blizzard -267. The system notification that Blizzard was injured appeared. This meant that Blizzard was really injured, even though the damage was nothing compared to Blizzard's tens of thousands of HP. Blizzard, are you okay? You're really injured. King Kong, who had been watching from the sidelines, rushed up and hugged Blizzard's body. Seeing that her stomach was still bleeding, King Kong felt terrible. She did not expect that Blizzard, who had been through countless cruel battles in the Warship Girl world without suffering a single injury, would be injured for the first time in her life here, and bleed for the first time in her life. It's okay, Sister King Kong. Blizzard is so happy. Blizzard is really happy. Blizzard frowned in pain, but there was an extremely contradictory and joyful smile on her face, a smile that came from the bottom of her heart. Blizzard, you idiot. What's there to be happy about after being stabbed? King Kong was puzzled. Had Blizzard been beaten silly? Sister King Kong, you don't know. Actually, every time I saw you fight against the welfare fleet, every time I saw you shed your blood for the Sea King, Blizzard envies you, envies that you can get injured, bleed, and feel pain. Unlike Blizzard, who only causes her teammates to bleed and get injured, but has never experienced the same pain as you. Blizzard spoke the truth that she had been hiding in her heart for a long time. I didn't expect that Blizzard would experience the same pain as you did here for the first time. That's why Blizzard is so happy that she can experience it. Blizzard is finally no longer the Warship Girl who only causes others to bleed and get injured. After saying this, Xuefeng closed his eyes with an unprecedented sense of satisfaction that he had never felt before in his life. Ahem, don't overthink it. 267 points of damage was not enough to kill Blizzard. She was just a little tired. However, just as Xuefeng closed his eyes to rest, another wailing sound suddenly rang out. Sour Popsicle, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Are you going to die? Military Governor, why are you so stupid? Why are you so stupid? Mr. Who is also called Admiral, what happened? Why is he dying? Blizzard quickly opened her eyes and asked King Kong. Well, you'll know when you see for yourself. With the help of King Kong, Xuefeng straightened his body and looked in the direction of Gohan. Xuefeng was instantly stunned. Gohan had already knelt on the ground. His head was deeply lowered, and he was buried in the arms of Mingyue, who had come to rescue him. His clothes were completely soaked in blood. Half of the Chinpin sword had pierced through Gohan's back. It was covered in blood, some from Gohan and some from Blizzard. King Kong, remember to be my horse. Chapter 38. Xiefeng's auspicious halo is indeed a very magical halo, or rather, it is a halo with a certain degree of wisdom. This halo can identify people or things that subjectively want to hurt Xiefeng, and then transfer all their actions back to itself. In a way, the auspicious halo can be regarded as a powerful ability to reverse the law of cause and effect. Wanting to hurt Xiefeng is the cause, and hurting Xiefeng is the effect. The auspicious halo can completely reverse this effect, and the damage will be directly returned through all defensive measures and items. After understanding this, I know how to deal with Xiefeng's auspicious halo. The answer is a little complicated. I need to have the intention to hurt Xiefeng to hurt myself. Because I tried to hurt Xiefeng, the auspicious halo detected my intention and began to reverse the cause and effect. Then I stabbed myself with a sword, but at this time, the cause and effect have been reversed, and the attack that was going to hurt me will be reversed to another target, which is Xiefeng. However, the core rule of the auspicious halo is to make Xiefeng not suffer any damage. This directly caused the truth to conflict with the core rule, and the auspicious halo was in an extremely contradictory state, as if the main program of the computer system had a logical error, so Xiefeng's auspicious halo simply crashed. The process of the auspicious halo crashing sounds quite long, but in fact it disappeared in less than a millionth of a second. Qingpin's sword was not blocked, and successfully hurt Xiefeng. Gohan, whose wound had been stopped bleeding, leaned on Mingyue's body and explained the scientific principle of how to break through Xiefeng's auspicious halo. Gohan had tried his best to make it easier to understand, but Ning and Song Hama, these two children with low IQ, were still confused and could not understand. Only Mingyue fell into deep thought, clearly understanding the meaning of Gohan's words. Can I understand it this way? Mingyue tried hard to summarize the thoughts in her mind. Keeping the intention to hurt Xiefeng will only hurt yourself. Only by keeping the intention to hurt yourself can you hurt Xiefeng. Some of the details of the logic are not correct, but overall, that's what I mean. Gohan nodded affirmatively. So, Sour Popsicle, you stabbed yourself in the stomach and skewered Snow Wind on your sword like a mutton kebab? Song Hama snapped after hearing Bright Moon's explanation. He vaguely understood what Bright Moon was trying to do. There's no other way. This is the only way to harm Xuefeng. Gohan chuckled when he saw the dissatisfaction on Song Hama's face. It's no big deal. This is a game. You can revive even if you die. Besides, it's just a small puncture wound. Don't talk to me about the game. If this was in real life, you wouldn't hesitate to do the same, right? Song Hama stood up angrily and kicked Gohan. You lunatic. You will die by your own hands one day. Dying in my own hands is better than dying in the hands of Yuan Ko. Gohan muttered to himself. Ship girl Xiefeng surrenders to Mr. Military Governor. After a short rest, Gohan and Blizzard's HP had basically recovered to full. Even the holes in their stomachs had healed up to the point where not a single trace could be seen. However, Xiefeng was an honest child. It immediately surrendered to Gohan and became Gohan's captive. System notice: Ship Girl Xiefeng has surrendered. She is invincible and cannot attack Ship Girl Xiefeng. This is Xiefeng's dimensional brocade box. Please keep it safe, Mr. Military Governor. Xiefeng respectfully handed the dimensional brocade box to Gohan. Gohan then handed it to Mingyue. Open it. Just remember to distribute according to the agreement. Understood. Bright Moon of that year did not decline. She readily opened the dimensional brocade box and quickly took out the first reward, a large stack of red notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mingyue skillfully rolled up the notes and counted them. There's a total of 100 notes. That's a total of 10,000 renminbi. According to the agreement, this 10,000 renminbi is mine. No problem, right? Military Governor? Of course. Gohan waved his hand. Mingyue quickly threw the stack of notes into her dimensional pocket. Although 10,000 renminbi was nothing in Mingyue's eyes, it was her first reward after entering the Crusade quest. The first 3 rewards actually went to Gohan. What's this? An oral fluid? The second item Mingyue looted was a small bottle of unlabeled green oral fluid. It was the first time she had seen such an item in over a decade of gaming. This must be the sword element oral fluid. Seeing this item, Guhan tried hard to recall and found a record of this oral fluid from a post on the forum. This is the sword element oral fluid that can only be obtained from the 8-city swordsmanship tournament. Mingyue happily held it in her hand and looked at it. This is the first time I've seen it. I didn't expect this to be dropped from a crusade quest. Hey, Mr. Military Governor, can you keep this oral fluid for me? The sword element oral fluid was similar to the sword element pill and sword element pill. It was an item that could increase the user's sword element points after consumption. However, unlike the sword element pill and sword element pill, the sword element oral fluid was an item that could only be obtained from the 8-city swordsmanship tournament. The 8-city swordsmanship tournament was held once every 15 years. The last time the sword element oral fluid appeared was 15 years ago. It was no wonder that Mingyue had never seen this item in her 10 years of gaming. Guhan had never seen the sword element oral fluid drop from a crusade quest even after going through millions of posts. It's probably because I entered a strange storyline that I obtained this item. Guhan could only guess. Hey, this oral fluid, can I keep it? Mingyue of that year nudged Guhan's back and asked again. Sure. Guhan thought about it. You can exchange it for 5 times the sword element pill. Guhan was a pragmatist. Although the sword essence oral solution that dropped in the mission was very rare, compared to the sword essence pill that was worth 5 times the amount, it was nothing. Che cheapskate. Who's going to exchange it with you? Mingyue stomped her foot. She was very dissatisfied with Guhan's attitude of not knowing how to be tender to the fairer sex. Anyway, the 8-city swordsmanship tournament is going to start again next month. When that time comes, I can easily get a dozen. Here, take it. Mingyue turned her head and handed the sword element oral fluid over, hoping that Guhan would find his conscience and be willing to give it to her. In the next second, Mingyue's hand was empty. The bottle of oral fluid was taken by Guhan, and he drank it on the spot. It's sweet and fruity. Faced with Mingyue's resentful eyes, Guhan said. Sword element oral fluid green untradeable unbound. Effect. Permanently increase 100 quarks of sword element after consumption. Usage restriction. No restrictions. Bah, heartless. To think that I even gave him a scabbard. This guy can forget about getting anything from me in the future. Bright Moon of that year muttered as she took out the next item from the dimensional brocade box. What's this? A fruit knife? Since when did the sword lady have a knife in the game? This time, Mingyue took out a dark green knife that seemed to be made of precious jade. It was the size of a fruit knife. This is green silk slash. Guhan took a deep breath. This woman's luck was a little too heaven-defying. She actually got a green silk slash. What, you said this is green silk slash? Mingyue was dumbfounded. She stared blankly at the knife in her hand. She couldn't believe that she had actually gotten the legendary green silk slash. If this was posted on the forum, the entire game would be shaken. Countless big shots would kneel down and lick her, just to get the green silk slash. Sour Popsicle, what's green silk slash? Why did Big Sis and Anran look so scared? Not long after entering the game, Song Hama, who did not know much about the game, asked Guhan. Green silk slash is an item that can only be used once. It can sever the fate between the wielder and the sword lady. It can perfectly cut off the sword mark in the wielder's body without harming the wielder's Zifu. In other words, it can completely sever the relationship between the wielder and the sword lady, allowing the wielder to return to a state without any synchronization with the sword lady. Sounds pretty powerful. Song Hama scratched her head. But, isn't losing the sword lady a terrible thing? What's there to be happy about? Big Sis looks like she picked up a treasure. The sword lady has indeed lost her, but the accumulated basic sword essence is still in the body. There won't be any changes. This body can still synchronize with the new sword lady. Synchronize with the new, top-notch sword lady. If your big sister Bright Moon had used Severgreen hair, then she would have lost an ancient sword tier sword lady, a treasure sword tier sword lady, and a famous sword tier sword lady. However, her sword element is still 20,000 points, so she can synchronize with 3 famed sword maidens at the same time. These are 3 famed sword maidens. If your big sis is patient enough, she could wait until the spirit sword and immortal sword before using green silk slash. When Gohan said this, his words were filled with deep jealousy. This Minghui of that year could actually open such a thing. Chapter 39. Item Name: Severed Black Hair. Tradable, unbound, can be dropped. Super Rare Item. Item Effect. After use, the original synchronized sword maidens will return to their original state and can synchronize new sword maidens. Usage Limitation. Can sever the connection between a maximum of 5 sword maidens and the sword wielder. Back then, Bright Moon spent a full 10 minutes to gradually wake up from the blissful dizziness. Then, she carefully hid the severed black hair in her dimensional pocket. She had already made up her mind. After this mission was completed, she would go to the People's Bank of Yuzhong City and open a 100 million renminbi safety deposit box with a super invincible 300% indemnity rate to protect the severed black hair. Do not be distressed by the 100,000 renminbi monthly insurance fee. If Mingyu had announced the news that she had the severed black hair back then, those spiritual sword tier and immortal sword tier sword wielders who had just entered the game would all be on their knees begging Mingyu to sell her the severed black hair back then. The value of this thing was more than 10 times more valuable than what Bright Moon had originally planned to get. Back then, Bright Moon even had the thought of immediately quitting the mission and going back to save the item. Are you awake? If you're awake, then continue to open the box. Gohan saw that Bright Moon's eyes were still blurry, so he knocked her head without hesitation. Gohan had been waiting for her for 10 minutes and had been jealous of her for 10 minutes. Whatever. Bright Moon yawned and lazily put her hand into the dimensional box. After obtaining the severed black hair, other things could no longer arouse Bright Moon's passion. Oh, it's a sword scar crystal. What a waste of my time. Toad, this is for you. Bright Moon gave this sword scar crystal to Toad without hesitation. Logically speaking, the sword scar crystal was also a very valuable item. It was the upgraded version of the sword scar dust and could easily be sold for tens of thousands of RMB in the auction house. If it was in the past, Bright Moon would have happily given it to Toad for a long time. Now, she looked down on it. Item Name: Sword Scar Crystal. Unbound, can be traded, can be dropped. Effect: sword maidens can use it to make deep sword scars. Base success rate is 80%. Usage limitation: only sword maidens who are level 6 and above can use it. The last item. Back then, Bright Moon had searched through the entire dimensional brocade box and confirmed that there was only one reward left. Moreover, the feeling of touching it was rather familiar. It can't be that thing again, right? Back then, Mingyu had made guesses in a very displeased manner. In the end, when she took a look with her naked eye, she had indeed taken out the secret manual for the heavenly sword. Take it. What a lucky bastard, there's actually another book. What kind of person is this? Bright Moon of that year muttered in annoyance. Ever since she obtained the green hair severing skill, she had become a little arrogant. Gohan smiled. Although there was the unexpected situation of cutting off her hair, everything else was under his control. Lord Vajra, I heard that this Jinyuan Guardian residence is actually a place that suppresses Jinyuan. Is that true? While walking on the road to the last shipgirl town, Song Hama pretended to be nonchalant. How did you know? Vajra looked at Gohan in confusion. She did not know that this secret had already been clearly written on the forum. However, there was no unified answer on the forum as to why Jin Yuan was suppressed. Most of it was just the players' own guesses. Yes, this is the Guardian residence that was specially built to suppress Jin Yuan. Vajra nodded helplessly and replied. Since it is indeed to suppress Jin Yuan, may I ask why there is not a single wall around here? After saying that, Song Hama looked around. This was a very wide platform on the cliff. The view here was very good. The sea, the beach, the forest, the sky, and all the scenery was within her grasp. There was not a single thing that blocked her view. This was definitely the best place to enjoy the beautiful scenery of the sea. However, for prisoners, this place was a little too easy to escape from. Moreover, if the person sitting on the rock in front is Jin Yuan, may I ask why you didn't even put a chain on her? Gohan continued to complain. At the very front of the cliff, there was a huge rock standing on it. And on this huge rock, there was a beautiful woman in black sitting there quietly. There were no handcuffs, chains, or charms on her body. There was nothing that could be imagined that could trap her. In this regard, Ming Yu and the others also expressed their curiosity and confusion, hoping to find out the truth from Vajra. Forget it, it's not a big deal to tell you. Vajra could not stand Song Hama's repeated questioning and said, actually, including His Majesty the Sea Emperor, no one really wants to suppress Lady Jin Yuan. Lady Jin Yuan can also leave this place at any time, and no one will stop her. It's just that she is unwilling to leave this place. Why is that? Song Hama could not understand. Would someone take the initiative to suppress her? Unfortunately, no matter how Song Hama asked, Vajra was unwilling to answer this question. F***ck, there must be an unforgettable love story behind this. Women were born to love gossip. And Ning, who had her ears pricked up, only heard a few dozen words from Vajra, and her mind was filled with millions of words of a touching love story. Perhaps. Gohan stopped and clapped his hands. Let's think about how to defeat and capture this Jin Yuan general first. Vajra, who are these people? I saw you guys fighting on the cliff. Why did you come here? This was a somewhat cold and somewhat annoyed voice. It felt like an imperial concubine who had stayed in the cold palace for more than 10 years. As soon as the voice fell, Jin Yuan, the ship girl in a long black dress, appeared in front of everyone. In this world, there is actually such an outstanding person. Seeing Jin Yuan's face, Mingyu could not help but have this thought back then. Soon after, she felt ashamed for the first time in her life. For a long time, whether it was in the game or in reality, Mingyu had left the deepest impression in her circle with her peerless beauty. This impression was so deep that whenever someone mentioned Mingyu, they would think of how beautiful she was, not how powerful she was. Mingyu was even a little annoyed by her beauty. She felt that if she was a little uglier, then others would recognize her ability more, and not her useless appearance, until now, when she saw Jin Yuan's face, Mingyu suddenly felt very unhappy. She began to hope that she was a little more beautiful, and the idea of hoping for others to recognize her strength had long been thrown away in Java. To paraphrase a saying, AB*TCH was a hypocrite. I didn't want them to disturb you, but Xiefeng and I were both defeated and captured, so I had to bring them here, Vajra replied unhappily. Even Xiefeng was defeated? Jin Yuan was taken aback, but she quickly recovered her cold and indifferent expression. Forget it, a defeat is a defeat. No matter who it is, they will be defeated sooner or later, just like me. His Majesty the Sea Emperor has never been defeated, Vajra retorted, unconvinced by Jin Yuan's words. Him? He's just a joke? Jin Yuan showed a trace of resentment, but he immediately concealed it. Since these people are here, they must be here to defeat me. Well, I've been a little bored recently, so I'll play with you guys. As soon as Jin Yuan said that, there was a flash of light behind him and a massive, majestic ship Maiden that looked like a prehistoric behemoth floated behind Jin Yuan. My Emperor's Sword of Ether. Is this really the ship's equipment? Except for Gohan, everyone was so frightened by the terrifying ship's equipment that they almost sat on the ground. Jin Yuan's ship's equipment was more than 30 times larger than Vajra's human-sized ship's equipment. A rough estimate showed that there were hundreds of cannons of different thicknesses installed in various parts of the ship's equipment. What was even more terrifying was the center of the ship's equipment, where there was a super electromagnetic gun, which was thousands of millimeters long and constantly emitting blue electromagnetic sparks, facing everyone. Back then, Mingyu believed that the super electromagnetic gun only needed one shot to turn the entire cliff into ruins. Emperor's Sword of Ether. The Jin Yuan in the strategy only has 4 double-mounted cannons. What Mingyu didn't know was that the Jin Yuan in the strategy was the original version of Jin Yuan in the Beiyang era. The current Jin Yuan had been modified by some unscrupulous Sea Emperor. Chapter 40. Hey, Military Governor, what level of Yuan Ko do you think this Jin Yuan is? Back then, Bright Moon couldn't help but swallow her saliva when she saw Jin Yuan's hundreds of cannons. It should be a little stronger than the dragon level. I don't know. The Jin Yuan in the forum is labeled as the Flood Dragon level, which is 1 level weaker than the dragon level. However, that was the Jin Yuan before the changes. No player has ever encountered the Jin Yuan after the changes, so there's no combat data that can be used to calculate its level. Gohan shook his head. Didn't you read that book? Did the book describe the Jin Yuan after the changes? Back then, Bright Moon asked. Yes. Thinking of the novel, Gohan's expression became very serious. It seemed that the description in the book was not good. According to the ability in the book, Jin Yuan's strength has probably reached the universe level. Universe level? Isn't that the same level as the Sword Maiden of the Immortal Sword tier? Back then, Bright Moon was so shocked that she couldn't close her mouth. What did this crusade mission mean? Was it asking a famed sword tier swordsman to bring a group of ancient swords and treasured swords to challenge the supreme existence of the Immortal Sword tier? Was there any balance in this game? Hey, Military Governor, you have a way to defeat her, right? With her ability, she couldn't think of any tactics or methods to defeat Jin Yuan. She could only hope that the man in front of her, who had always been creating miracles, could create another miracle. A way to defeat Jin Yuan? The military governor smiled bitterly. That's impossible. If this was the Jin Yuan before the changes, I have 100 ways to defeat her. However, this is the Jin Yuan after the changes. Even if Gu Jinfeng was here, he wouldn't be able to withstand a single volley from Jin Yuan. According to the description in The Last Military Governor in the Shipgirl world, the Jin Yuan after the changes can cover every square meter of the battlefield. It's impossible to dodge. Also, her super electromagnetic gun, ICBM, electromagnetic beam more than 10 meters thick, and precision guidance of a square meter. How can we dodge it? Back then, Bright Moon didn't say anything. She bit her lips and struggled internally for a long time. Then, she confided in Gohan. Military Governor, how about I give up on the mission? A universe-level opponent isn't someone we can deal with. In any case, our rewards have far exceeded the value of this mission book. We've already earned enough. Give up? Is it enough? Hearing Mingyu's words, Gohan felt quite dissatisfied and coldly laughed. You're the one who's worth it. Cutting off your hair is indeed worth it, but what does that have to do with me? How can you say that? Back then, Mingyu had heard the sarcasm in Gohan's words, and the anger in her heart had been ignited. You've also obtained 2 secret manuals of the Heavenly Sword. Isn't that enough? Sorry, for me, this is not enough, Gohan said proudly. You idiot. Bright Moon of that year. You motherf asterisk cur, Gohan said. For some reason, the two of them, who were originally cooperating with each other, suddenly started arguing. Moreover, their voices were getting louder and louder, and the argument was getting more and more intense. Their faces were red, and they wanted nothing more than to fight for 300 rounds. "What are the two of you arguing about? Are you going to capture me or not?" Zhen Yuan, whose head was hurting from all kinds of obscenities, shouted at the two of them. "Sir Zhen Yuan, we're arguing about whether or not I can defeat you," Gohan said sincerely, as if he and Mingyu of that year were really arguing about this issue. "Oh, so you think you have the ability to defeat me?" Zhen Yuan's cold face finally revealed a trace of a smile. He could finally find some fun in these poor days. "Yes, Sir Zhen Yuan. I think that, under certain conditions, I can indeed defeat you." Gohan's expression was very serious. "What conditions?" Zhen Yuan's curiosity was ignited, and he asked. But he didn't know that he had unknowingly fallen into the trap that Gohan had set up. "I heard that Sir Zhen Yuan's swordsmanship is superb. I'm not talented, but I think that my swordsmanship is also unparalleled in the world. Therefore, I'm willing to seek advice from Sir Zhen Yuan on pure swordsmanship." Gohan finally revealed his fundamental purpose. "You want to compete with me on pure swordsmanship?" Zhen Yuan was stunned for a moment, and then 100 flowers bloomed on his face. His already peerless face smiled even more beautifully. "I couldn't ask for more," Zhen Yuan said. As the saying went, when the Jade Emperor closed a door for someone, he would open a window for him. Gohan's talent in swordsmanship was pitifully weak, and he was not on the same level as those geniuses who were born with hundreds of quirks of swordsmanship. But in terms of talent in swordsmanship, these geniuses who were talked about by the public couldn't even compare to a hair of Gohan. There were a total of 3 sets of swordsmanship passed down by Gohan's ancestors, and each set was more profound, more difficult, and more terrifying than the last. Among Gohan's ancestors, there was no lack of people who wanted to master these 3 sets of swordsmanship, but after practicing for a lifetime, they couldn't even touch the first set of the 9 swords of mysterious heaven, and their power was inferior to that of a child's random swordsmanship. Therefore, Gohan's ancestors put these 3 sets of swordsmanship on the shelf, warning their descendants not to waste their precious time and youth on these swordsmanship. However, Gohan succeeded. It took Gohan less than 5 years to master the 9 swords of mysterious heaven, and another 5 years to practice the 9 swords of mysterious heaven to the point where his heart and sword were one. In terms of talent in swordsmanship, Gohan was definitely a genius that appeared once in 4,000 years. The difficulty of the 3 sets of swordsmanship was directly proportional to their power. Even the 9 swords of mysterious heaven, which was the most basic of the 3 sets, almost crushed all the swordsmanship that existed in the current world. Gohan had once compared some of the battle videos of celestial sword ladies on the internet and found that in terms of swordsmanship alone, even celestial sword ladies were no match for the 9 swords of mysterious heaven. Not to mention that there were 2 more sets of swordsmanship after the 9 swords of mysterious heaven. After understanding this fact, Gohan had once spent several months trying to find traces of these 3 sets of swordsmanship in history. It was impossible that such powerful swordsmanship did not leave any records. Moreover, according to the legends of his ancestors, Gohan had the bloodline of an emperor sword wielder and was a descendant of an emperor sword family that should have stood at the top of society. However, no matter how much information Gohan flipped through, he was unable to find any information about the 9 swords of mysterious heaven and his ancestors. It was as if countless pairs of black hands had completely erased all this information from the world. Forget it. No matter what the origin of the 9 swords of mysterious heaven was, it was enough as long as it could defeat Jin Yuan. Yuan Codename, Jin Yuan. Level, Hong level. 2-dimensional world. Shipgirl world. Appearance Instance Dungeon. None. Appearance Crusade Mission. Jin Yuan Garrison Crusade Mission. Health points, 7 stars. Armor, 7 stars. Agility, 5 stars. Artillery, 7 stars. Ability, 3000 mm invincible armor, 360 degrees without blind spots, no upper and lower limits of super-accurate coverage firepower. At full power, its firepower can destroy the entire city. In addition, it is said that Jin Yuan also has a very deep understanding of ancient Huaxia swordsmanship. Ultimate move. Bullet screen sweep, precise decapitation, infinite barrier, super electromagnetic gun. Introduction. Battleship Jin Yuan. The original body was the second ship of the Dingyuan-class battleship of the Qing dynasty's Beiyang fleet 1,100 years ago. It sank in the Jiawu naval battle that determined the history of Huaxia. It was a pain in the hearts of all the descendants of Yan and Huang. Later, it was reborn in the ship-girl world and met the Sea Emperor in the historical battle. After a lot of love and hate with the Sea Emperor, it sank under the lightning strike of the Welfare Fleet. The hull was later salvaged. Under the leadership of Snow Dragon, it was modernized and installed with hundreds of various cannons, missiles, and black technology super electromagnetic guns. It became one of the most powerful combat forces of the Sea Emperor Empire. After the transformation and battle, it was appointed by the Sea Emperor to be the flagship of the Yan Huang garrison, the head of the 4 major garrison armies. It was also the Prime Minister of the Inner Cabinet and the Chief of the Navy. It was one of the top ministers of the Sea Emperor Empire. At the same time, the modified Jin Yuan was also known as the most beautiful shipgirl in the world. According to unofficial records, Jin Yuan was actually the biological mother of the eldest son of the Sea Emperor Empire and the second heir. Chapter 41. Inside the punitive expedition map, in the Jin Yuan Guardian Mansion, on the rooftop of the cliff, Jin Yuan, who had a giant ship floating behind him, and Gu Han, who only held a poor sword in his hand, stood opposite each other. Rules of the competition. Both sides are not allowed to use ship equipment, sword maidens, cannons, sword chi, or any other supernatural means. They can only rely on the most basic swordsmanship to fight. Once either side is hit by 3 swords, they will lose immediately. Jean Gang, who was the referee, announced the rules of the duel loudly. This was a duel between swordsmen. Putting aside ship equipment, sword maidens, cannons, and sword chi, it was a duel purely based on one's own swordsmanship. Jin Yuan patted the ship equipment behind him and sighed. I've long been used to fighting with these effortless cannons. I didn't expect to fight with a sword again. It's really nostalgic. As soon as he finished speaking, the huge warship turned into specks of starlight and disappeared into the void like fireworks. Jin Yuan, who had withdrawn his ship equipment, suddenly thought of something. He turned around, spread out his empty hand to Gohan, and shouted loudly, I haven't used a sword for a long time. This new body is not like before, and it doesn't have a sword. Can you lend me a sword? He actually wants to borrow a sword from me, an enemy. Gohan's face darkened, but he did not dare to refuse. What if the other party used this reason to destroy the situation of a swordsmanship duel that he had painstakingly created? Gohan hesitated for a moment, and had no choice but to take out a shining bronze sword from his dimensional pocket. It couldn't be helped. He did not have a second sword on hand. As long as he did not inject sword essence into it, it did not matter if it was a famous sword or a treasured sword. Compared to an ordinary sword, it was just stronger and more durable. Catch! Gohan threw the sword to Jin Yuan and was secretly worried. I hope Mingyue and the others recognize this sword, otherwise there will be trouble. Good sword. After receiving the bronze sword that Gohan threw over, Jin Yuan immediately felt that this sword was extraordinary. Although it didn't look special compared to other bronze swords, there was a faint, breathtaking aura flowing under the sword. For the sake of this sword, I'll hold back 30% of my strength later so that you won't lose too badly. Zhen Yuan's face was full of smiles, as beautiful and contented as a valley welcoming spring. In her opinion, there was no difference between keeping 30% or 70% of her strength. It was more than enough to deal with this arrogant human. No need. Jin Yuan, bring out your true sword technique. Guhan moved his sword sideways and took a big stride forward, taking the initiative to attack Jin Yuan. I also want to know how strong my swordsmanship is. Big sister. Why do I feel that the sword in Jin Yuan's hand looks somewhat familiar? Unran, who was watching from the side, felt that the bronze sword was too familiar. It was as if he had seen it somewhere before, but he couldn't remember it. It should be a replica of the King of Yu's Gojian's sword. Looks like he's a fan of the Queen of Yu. This sword replica isn't cheap. Back then, Mingyu had recognized that this was the King of Yu's Gojian sword. However, she had never imagined that this King of Yu's Gojian sword would belong to Gohan's sword Maiden. Instead, she took it for granted that it was a replica that Gohan had bought to admire. This was very normal. Many swordsmiths' main income came from forging 100% similar replicas of famous swords, even though creating artificial sword maidens was their job. This man is so strong. This was the sigh that came from the bottom of Jin Yuan's heart 3 minutes after the battle with Gohan began. She had never thought that this human would be so strong in terms of swordsmanship, to the point where he was on par with her. Jin Yuan had long since taken back the words he had said during the meeting, such as holding back 30% of his strength. If Jin Yuan had really held back 30% of his strength, he would have probably been KO'd by Gohan by now. Jin Yuan's sword technique came from a famous swordsman during the Northern Ocean period. At that time, there were still many masters in China's martial arts festival. When the Qing dynasty entered the pass, they also snatched many sword technique manuals and stored them in the palace's treasury. After finding out that Jin Yuan liked swordsmanship, Li Hongzhang asked for a lot of imperial family's secret manuals from Empress Dowager Cixi and invited a swordsmanship master to teach Jin Yuan swordsmanship. In addition to Jin Yuan's high talent in swordsmanship, the three of them combined to form Jin Yuan's invincible swordsmanship. After practicing swordsmanship in Jinyuan for 2 years, the swordsmanship master who taught her resigned in shame. When she visited Fusang's naval base several times, she beat up all the shipgirls in Fusang. That shipgirl Taketorai, who claimed to have inherited Kagaya's swordsmanship, was also defeated by Jinyuan. From then on, she was no longer willing to mention anything related to swords. However, with the continuous development of cannons, the battle between the warships had become a situation of firepower and planes exploding. There was no room for swordsmanship in a naval battle. The era of people like Ziyuan, who relied on their own swordsmanship to collide with the opponent and even perish together, was no longer there. Returning to the main topic, Jin Yuan and Gohan exchanged dozens of moves in a row and used some of their trump cards, but they gradually fell into a disadvantage. They were suppressed by Gohan's sword momentum step by step and were in a disadvantageous situation. There's a chance. Suddenly, Jin Yuan saw a flaw in Gohan's movement. Eager to turn the situation around, she did not think too much and immediately attacked that flaw. Good timing! Gohan exclaimed in his heart. He did not expect Jin Yuan's swordsmanship to be so powerful that it was almost on par with his. Fortunately, his mind was not flexible enough and he could not tell that he had deliberately exposed this flaw. Jin Yuan did not expect that the flaw that he saw as a way to turn the situation around was deliberately exposed by Gohan. When he swung his sword, Gohan, who was already prepared, dodged it. However, his back was exposed in front of Gohan, and his clothes were cut by the other party's sword. Jin Yuan, you've been hit by a sword. King Kong hurriedly announced the result. Jin Yuan, who had been struck first, began to panic. When he attacked again, his entire sword momentum was like a ferocious tiger that had been released from its cage. He attacked everywhere and used killing moves. Coupled with Jin Yuan's inexhaustible physical strength as a shipgirl, the entire situation was reversed in an instant. Jin Yuan was suppressing Gohan, and Gohan was in a disadvantageous position. I'm a little excited. This is the first time I've encountered an opponent who can suppress me head-on. Gohan felt that his blood was already burning. In the future, when he practiced swordsmanship, many of the basic swordsmanship that he did not take seriously and did not practice well would be completely exposed. The 9 Swords of Mysterious Heaven was not a simple swordsmanship technique. Almost all of the 9 swords relied on sword elements and sword chi to launch move. Swordsmanship was only the foundation and was hidden in each sword move. Usually, it was covered by various powerful sword chi skills, so Gohan did not pay much attention to it. This time, with the help of Zhen Yuan's pure swordsmanship, Gohan honed these parts that he usually neglected. Gradually, as these details that he usually ignored were honed more skillfully and meticulously, Gohan's swordsmanship became more and more perfect and difficult to target. On the other hand, Zhen Yuan slowly felt that the situation was developing in a bad direction again. He vaguely felt that he could no longer suppress his opponent. If his opponent had used a cunning trick to defeat him, then his opponent had now begun to surpass him in strength and suppress him. At this moment, his opponent was starting to surpass him in terms of strength and suppress him. It was like Mount Tai was pressing down on him, gradually pressuring him to the point where he couldn't breathe. Ah! Zhen Yuan shouted and suddenly attacked 3 times at an extremely fast speed. Each strike was faster than the last, and each strike was aimed at the same place. This was Zhen Yuan's most powerful move, the 3 strokes of Plum Blossom. Although the name sounded a little vulgar, it was the most powerful move in the Qing dynasty's ancient book. Good! Gohan could also see the danger of this move and knew that victory or defeat depended on this moment. As he concentrated, he felt that the entire world had stopped for a moment. Clang! Qingpin's sword struck the Yu King's Gojian sword. The Yu King's Gojian sword let out a sad cry and deviated from its original path. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Gohan took the opportunity to attack and left another sword mark on Zhen Yuan's shoulder. I'm done. Zhen Yuan threw the Yu King's Gojian sword away and waved his hand. His charming face was full of exhaustion. It was mental exhaustion. For a powerful ship girl like her, the intensity of this battle did not consume much of her physical strength. There's still one more strike. Gohan did not want to take advantage of Zhen Yuan. I'm done. I admit that in terms of swordsmanship, I'm not as good as you. I didn't expect there to be a human with such powerful swordsmanship like you in the real world. Didn't I hear that you humans have forgotten how to use a sword ever since you had a sword girl? Zhen Yuan waved his hand. When Gohan heard Zhen Yuan's words, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. There seemed to be some great secret in this sentence. This is for you. Zhen Yuan took out a dimensional brocade box and threw it to Gohan. This is what you want, right? It's rare for you to skip work, but you're going back early. King Kong. Xiefeng. We should go back. Zhen Yuan waved at King Kong and Xiefeng, then turned to look at Gohan. If there's a chance, I'm looking forward to fighting you again with my ship's equipment. Of course, it'll be on the sea. After saying that, Zhen Yuan tapped the air slightly and disappeared in front of Gohan. Don't. Zhen Yuan, King Kong, I still want to play more. King Kong shouted. Seeing that Zhen Yuan had left, he made a face at Gohan and also disappeared. Goodbye. Xiefeng also waved at Gohan and also disappeared. System prompt. Zhenyuan Guardian Mansion Crusade quest completed. The quest map will close in 10 minutes. System prompt. Zhenyuan Guardian Mansion Crusade quest completed. The quest map will close in 10 minutes. Chapter 42. For Ming Yu and the others, who were watching the battle from the side, the victory was so sudden and unbelievable. The swordsmanship contest between Gohan and Zhenyuan had completely exceeded the understanding of Ming Yu and the others. Their eyes could not capture Gohan and Zhenyuan's movements at all. Often, when they saw where Zhenyuan's sword was, it would be blocked by Gohan's swift figure in the next moment. The battle scene between the two of them was so dazzling that people couldn't even look at it directly. It was really impossible to look at it directly. Back then, Mingyu only looked at it for less than 10 seconds before she felt her eyes turning red and dry, her pituitary gland turning into a ball of paste, and her brain starting to explode with pain. Back then, Mingyu imagined that if she was on Zhen Yuan's or Gu Han's side, it would not even take 3 seconds for her, who could not even see where the sword was, to be chopped into a pile of minced meat by her opponent. Therefore, when Zhen Yuan suddenly announced that he had lost and disappeared from the crusade mission with the ship girls, Mingyu and the others did not react at all. Their minds were still filled with the intense scene of swordsmanship. It was not until Gahan threw Zhen Yuan's dimensional brocade box to Mingyu that she realized that she had already won. The crusade mission of Zhen Yuan Guardian Mansion had been completed. Although the victory came a little abruptly, the reward was not discounted at all. In fact, it was far more than Gahan had imagined. From the dimensional brocade box given by Zhen Yuan, Mingyu had obtained a total of 12 items, which was more than what King Kong and Xiefeng had given her combined. It was indeed worthy of being the last super boss of the crusade mission. Among these 12 items, the most numerous and least valuable one was probably the RMB. There were 4 dozen of RMB worth 10,000 yuan per dozen, which accounted for 1/3 of the 12 items. Originally, these 4 dozen RMB should have belonged to Mingyu's side, but under Mingyu's insistence, the 4 dozen RMB were divided equally on the spot at 10,000 yuan per person. The second was the essence sword pill. There were 3 purple essence sword pills. Each pill could increase the value of 100 quarks of essence. Compared to the blue essence sword pill that had been obtained from King Kong, it could increase the value of 10 quarks. This purple sword pill that could increase one's strength by as much as 100 quarks was very rare in the game world. Essence sword pill, purple, tradable, not bound. Effect: permanently increases 100 quarks of sword essence after consumption. Usage limit: each player can take a maximum of 1 essence sword pill per day. Each player can take a maximum of 100 essence sword pills per day. Taking more than that will be ineffective. In the game world, there was a limit to the number of sword essence pills that could be consumed. Purple and blue pills were the same. They could only be consumed at most 100 pills. However, the amount of sword essence increased from 1,000 quarks to 10,000 quarks of sword essence. As long as you had enough RMB and took 1 pill every day, you could easily become a famed sword-level swordsman in 100 days. Compared to the bitter players who had to grind dungeons day and night to earn essence sword pills to increase their essence sword, it was so much easier. Therefore, because of the enthusiastic pursuit of the local tycoons, the price of the purple sword essence pill in the auction house was basically not lower than 20,000 renminbi, and it was in a state where there was demand but no supply. According to the agreement between Gahan and Mingyu back then, the 3 purple sword essence pills were handed over to Gahan, and he swallowed them in 1 gulp. With the addition of the blue sword essence pill and the bottle of essence oral solution, Gahan's essence sword points in the game increased from 109 to 509. He was only halfway to becoming a treasured sword-level swordsman with 1,000 points. Speaking of treasured sword-level swordsmen, Heavenly Sword had to be mentioned. It was the sword lady that Gahan had decided to rank first in the treasured sword record. Since Heavenly Sword had the title of being the best among treasured swords, its abilities were naturally outstanding. In history, all the sword wielders who had Heavenly Sword stated that Heavenly Sword had strength that did not lose to sword ladies of famed sword tier. In fact, Heavenly Sword tier was even more powerful than most of the sword ladies of famed sword tier. Placing her at treasured sword tier was an insult to Heavenly Sword tier. Gahan had specially researched Heavenly Sword's attributes, and he realized that Heavenly Sword was definitely the sword lady most suited to his abilities among all the treasured sword-level sword ladies. If Heavenly Sword was in Gohan's hands, he was confident that he could make Heavenly Sword unleash the power at the peak of famed sword level. More importantly, Heavenly Sword was still in a dormant state in the real world. It did not have its own swordsman. If Gohan could successfully synchronize with Heavenly Sword in the game, he would have the chance to synchronize with Heavenly Sword in the real world. That was why Gohan had decided to make Heavenly Sword his treasured sword lady a long time ago. Gohan seemed to have never considered the fact that there was less than a 0.0001% chance that he would not be able to become a sword bearer in the real world, and that there was a 994% chance of failure when synchronizing with Heavenly Sword. Up until now, out of the 100,000 sword bearers who had attempted to synchronize with Heavenly Sword, only 6 had succeeded. Gohan had been extremely lucky to obtain 2 Heavenly Sword secret manuals from Guardian Deity and Snow Wind's dimensional brocade box. If the 2 mini-bosses were already like this, then the final boss, Zhen Yuan's dimensional brocade box, was no exception. Furthermore, he had obtained 2 secret manuals for the Heavenly Sword. Back then, when Mingyu took out these 2 secret manuals, her eyes had turned green with envy. She believed that if she had not obtained the peerless divine weapon, Green Severing Threads, Mingyu would have definitely shamelessly taken away the 2 Heavenly Sword secret manuals. For a rather long period of time after that, whenever Mingyu thought about the 4 Heavenly Sword secret manuals, she would feel that something was off. It was as if Gohan had long since known that the drop rate for Heavenly Sword secret manuals in the quest would be so high, but he could not find any proof, because the other players had never seen any Heavenly Sword secret manuals in the quest. Aside from Heavenly Sword's keepsake, there was another Sword Lady's keepsake in the dimensional brocade box. It was the keepsake for the Sword Lady's Cyan Rainbow Sword, whetstone for the Cyan Rainbow Sword. The whetstone for the Cyan Rainbow Sword was worth a lot. If it was put up for auction, it would be worth around 800,000, but there was no market for it. If Mingyu was lucky enough to run into a rich sword bearer who was collecting Cyan Rainbow Swords, she might even be able to sell it for 2 million. Back then, Mingyu had unceremoniously put the keepsake into her bag. At that point, the 10 items that were not worth much had all been explained. Naturally, the remaining 2 items were the 2 most valuable items. The first item was a normal-looking porcelain washbasin with the picture of a peony flower in full bloom printed on it. This kind of porcelain washbasin was made according to the picture passed down from 1,000 years ago, and it still existed in every household. For mortals, even after 10,000 years, soaking their feet in hot water was still an extraordinary pleasure. However, the washbasin that had dropped was not a normal washbasin. It had a resounding name, and it was called cornucopia. Wait, you're asking if it's the kind of cornucopia that will make thousands of cornucopia that are worth 1 RMB appear when you put 1 RMB in it? That's right, you're right. It's that cornucopia, but its effect is not as exaggerated as putting 1 RMB in it and making 1,000 RMB appear. It can only be replicated once, and once it's replicated, it will immediately become useless. Cornucopia. Special item. Untradeable. Bound. Cannot be dropped. Effect. Perfectly replicates a game item of a certain strength. There is no difference between the replica and the original, and the effect is exactly the same. Usage restriction. Can only be used once, 1 replica at a time. The value of the cornucopia depended on the sample that you put in it. If you foolishly put 1 RMB in it, then the cornucopia would only be worth 1 RMB. But if you put a Spirit Sword Maiden's keepsake in it, then this cornucopia would be worth a Spirit Sword Maiden's keepsake. Well, the Spirit Sword Maiden level was the limit of the cornucopia. If you put something that surpassed the Spirit Sword Maiden level, such as severed green hair, it would be impossible to replicate it. Mingyu had confirmed this with severed green hair. After opening the cornucopia, Mingyu hesitated for a while and gave it to Gohan. In her words, without Gohan, it would be impossible to defeat Jin Yuan, so this cornucopia was the reward that Gohan deserved. In this regard, Gohan did not argue and readily accepted it. Although this Mingyu was a bit stupid, she was a good person. I can cooperate with her a few more times in the future, Gohan secretly thought in his heart. As a result, in the future, Mingyu relied on her cooperation with Gohan and obtained a lot of good things. This was something that Mingyu never thought of when she made the decision to give up the cornucopia. There was another reason why Mingyu decided to give the cornucopia to Gohan, and that was the final item that Mingyu opened, the fundamental reason that made Mingyu enter this mission. Order to establish a sect. Special item. Tradable, bound, and can be dropped. Effect. Use this order in the municipal building of the city ruins occupied by Yuan Ko to announce the establishment of a sect to the world. After successfully establishing a sect, you can occupy the city as your own sect. Hint. After using the order, a large number of Yuan Ko will come to attack the city. Please gather enough forces to join your sect to defend your city. Once the municipal building is captured, you and your sect will be greatly punished. Chapter 43. Establishing a sect was the biggest dream of every ambitious swordsman. They wanted to lead a group of powerful swordsmen to fight against the Yuan Ko who had occupied the ancient city. They wanted to take back the city that belonged to the humans and establish a new sect. They wanted to become a big shot who could influence the entire game world. If the influence of a powerful swordsman only existed in the game, then the influence of a sword sect could be extended to the real world. Then, the influence of a sword sect could be extended to the real world. At the very least, you could invite a cute female sword wielder from your sect to have a lovey-dovey activity in real life, wouldn't you? It was especially so for the existences known as the 10 Great Sword Sect. Their influence radiated to almost every corner of the world, be it politics, business, academies, military, or aristocratic families. The shadows of the 10 Great Sword Sects could be seen almost everywhere. Or rather, the shadows of these great figures could be seen in the 10 Great Sword Sects. It was not an easy task to establish a sword sect. Apart from recruiting powerful players, clearing the ruins of the city, and resisting the invasion of the Yuan Ko, the first step had already stopped the dreams of countless ambitious people who wanted to establish a sect. That was the Sect Opening Decree. The Sect Opening Decree was issued by the Human Council. It was the only legal proof of establishing a sect. Only by obtaining it could one establish a sect that was recognized by the system. For example, the small team that Mingwei had formed was only for self-entertainment. The source of the Sect Opening Decree was quite wide. It could be obtained by clearing the Instance Dungeon and the Crusade Instance Dungeon. It could also be obtained by completing the tasks of the People's Committee of the Swordsmen. It could also be obtained by accumulating reputation points. It could also be obtained by killing the Yuan Ko in the wild. It could even be obtained by winning the lottery. From the looks of it, the production rate of the founding decree should be quite high. But in reality, the production rate of this thing was so low that it was touching. The probability of being crushed to death by a meteorite while walking on the road was even higher than the production rate of the founding decree. What was even more outrageous was that there was a limit to the number of sect opening decrees. Every year, a maximum of 3 sect opening decrees could be obtained. Once there were more than 3 sect opening decrees, one would not be able to obtain them from the system within the year. Due to certain reasons, Mingyu was in desperate need of this sect creation token. She heard that the drop rate of the sect creation token was the highest among all the Crusade quests, so she collected a large number of Crusade quest books. In fact, Mingyu still had more than 10 new Crusade quest books in her hands, but she never expected that the Crusade quest book would drop on her first Crusade quest book. It was simply infuriating to a certain comrade who had been fighting for 3 years for this token. Before they parted, in order to once again express her gratitude to Gu Han, as well as the fact that Ming Yu was unable to complete so many crusade mission books back then, she simply gave 3 of them to Gu Han as a final reward. In the end, Gu Han did a total of 4 heavenly sword manuals, 1 universal scabbard, blue snow, 1 cornucopia, 10,000 megabytes, 410 quarks of sword elements, and 3 brand new quest books from the crusade. You shameless military governor! How dare you treat this king like this today? As soon as Gu Han returned to her sword tomb and released the sword Maiden Yu Wang from her dimensional pocket, she immediately transformed into her sword Maiden form, pointed at Gu Han's nose, and rebuked him angrily. This king is warning you, if you dare to put this king in your dimensional pocket again, this king will die with you even if I have to give up this consciousness fragment. Thinking of the humiliation she had suffered today, Yu Wang was so angry that she almost self-destructed her consciousness fragment on the spot. For the sword bearers in battle, other than the sword lady who transformed into her sword lady form, the other ship ladies remained in their sword forms beside the sword bearers. Some of these sword ladies were carried on their backs, some were hung on their waists, some were held in their hands, some were carried by sword slaves, and of course, some were placed in the dimensional pocket. It did not matter where they were placed. But for the sword ladies there was a huge difference. Being held in the hands of the wielder meant that the wielder often used the sword. The strongest sword lady represented the highest respect of the wielder, and was the position that the sword ladies wanted to be in the most. For example, Ming Yu's sunset sword had always been held in her hands, and she rarely put it down. However, the sword bearer usually had 2 or 3 sword ladies. Only 2 sword ladies could be held in their hand all the time. Moreover, holding a sword with 2 hands at the same time looked too stupid. Therefore, on the body of the wielder of the sword, there had to be another part of the body to protect the other sword maidens. The back of the sword wielder was a position that the sword wielder could not see. It was a position that could not be defended, and it was the biggest flaw. By placing the sword lady there, it meant that the sword wielder was the most at ease. The sword lady would be the most intimate with the sword wielder at all times. For the sword ladies, it was the best position after being held in the hand of the sword bearer. For example, Bright Moon's skin-shattering sword and Cold Iron sword were carried on her back. Then, the sword bearers hung their swords on their waist. Fortunately, the sword bearers came up with all sorts of theories, such as the waist was the most handsome position, the closest to their core, and the most convenient position to pick up. At the very least, the sword bearers managed to coax the sword bearers into reluctantly accepting the treatment of being hung on their waist. The above positions were all acceptable for the sword ladies. However, if any sword bearer dared to put their sword lady in the dimensional pocket, it would be an extreme insult to the sword lady. The pitch-black dimensional pocket where time and space couldn't be touched was the most hated place for the ship ladies. Being locked in there was the same concept as being locked in a dog cage. Therefore, as soon as Yu Wang returned to her sword lady form, she immediately rushed out. She couldn't wait to fight with Gu Han and perish together to take revenge for the humiliation of being locked in the dimensional pocket. Apologies. I was afraid that if I left you outside, it would arouse the suspicions of Bright Moon's people. To a newbie like me, your existence is something that is hard to explain. Gu Han calmly gave a reasonable explanation. This made King Yu's expression slightly better, but it was still so dark that water could be squeezed out of it. Just this once. Yu Wang thought about it. In order to stay in this world, she decided to endure this humiliation. In the future, you are not allowed to put this king into the dimensional pocket again. Otherwise, this king will immediately self-destruct and perish together with you. Self-destructing a consciousness fragment was the saddest and most helpless choice for a sword lady. Once self-destructed, the consciousness fragment of the sword lady would completely shatter, and the body would become an ordinary sword. The sword bearer would also forever lose a sword lady as well as the sword lady quota. Once it self-destructed, it meant that the relationship between the sword lady and the sword wielder had deteriorated to the point that it was a blood feud. Either one of them would die or the other would die. There were not many such examples in history, and it was rare for it to happen even once a year. No sword wielder would be stupid enough to hurt his own sword lady. Except for Gohan. One more time. Gohan thought about it and replied, "I'll have to trouble you again." "Enough. You don't need to talk nonsense." Yu Wang smiled miserably. "This king will self-destruct for you to see." Who would have thought that after 900 years, this king would reach the end of the road again? Don't be impulsive. Don't be impulsive. Gohan held Yu Wang's hand and caressed it. "Listen to me, since I'm going to bring you outside, I have to go out and buy a scabbard for you. Otherwise, if people see me, an ancient sword bearer with a famous sword, how can I live? Bear with it one more time, I promise, just one more time. The next time I go out, I'll buy a scabbard for you so that I can hold it in my hand. Even the Chinpin's sword will be on her back." "What, in my hand? Who wants to be held by you?" Yu Wang's heart itched from Gohan's caress. When she heard the words "hold it in her hand," she immediately blushed. "Then this king will believe you this once. Next time you must buy a scabbard for this king. Don't worry. This king. Oh no, military governor, I will do what I say and I will not go back on my word." Gohan heaved a sigh of relief. He had finally pacified this great ant. Actually, half of the reason why Gohan threw Yu Wang into the dimensional pocket was because of what he said just now. The other half was because he wanted to teach Yu Wang a lesson so that she wouldn't be shameless, bastard, and despicable all day long. After this, Yu Wang became much more docile. Message from Toad, who eats black chicken white phoenix pills. Sour popsicle, hurry up and log off. Something big has happened, something super big has happened. Hurry up and log off. I'll come to your house right away. Song Hama's sudden message caused Gohan to be stunned. Just what had happened to make this fellow so anxious? "I have something to do, so I have to log off. I've already opened the internet in the Sword Tomb. Go online by yourself and watch a movie. I'll be back in a while." Gohan threw down this sentence and prepared to log out of the game. "Wait." Yu Wang suddenly grabbed Gohan's hand and stopped him from logging out of the game. "What's wrong?" "There's one more sword that's very important." Yu Wang's expression was serious. "Although this king still doesn't recognize you as this king's sword wielder, if you dare to throw this king to another woman and let another woman use this king will immediately self-destruct. There won't be a next time." Gohan moved his head to the side of Yu Wang's head and rubbed his face against hers, as he whispered in her ear. Chapter 44. "Tell me, why did you call me out all of a sudden? If there's nothing important, then you're dead meat." Gohan looked helplessly at Song Hama, who was so excited that he looked like Fat Two who had smelled the original scent. His eyes were bloodshot. "Gohan. My dear Gohan. I did it." Song Hama threw herself into Gohan's arms like a little bird, burying her face in Gohan's woolen sweater. She kept swaying left and right, rubbing herself against him. "So, what's the matter?" Gohan grabbed Song Hama's collar and pulled him away from his arm. He asked in confusion, "What did you do?" "A sword wielder. I've become a sword wielder." Song Hama's excited voice began to tremble. "I know you've become a sword wielder. You became a sword wielder a month ago. Now, I'm also a sword wielder. Everyone who enters the game is a sword wielder. What's there to be excited about?" Gohan could not understand why Song Hama was so excited. "It's not a game, Gohan. It's not a game," Song Hama shouted, trying to break free from Gohan's control. "It's not a game?" Gohan was stunned for a moment, and the hand that was grabbing onto Song Hama's collar unconsciously loosened, causing Song Hama, who was caught off guard, to fall to the ground and eat his face. "It's in the real world. In the real world." Guhan, I just went to the automatic coin-operated sword essence testing machine to check my sword essence value. Brother, I have 205 quarks of sword essence now. I'm qualified to go through the sword inscription ceremony. If I'm lucky, I'll become a sword wielder. Song Hama rushed to Guhan's building the moment he heard the news. He wanted to share his joy with Guhan. Is that so? That's a big deal. Guhan snapped back to reality and forced a smile. He patted Song Hama's shoulder and said, "Congratulations, brother. I'll treat you tonight. Let's go to Starbucks and have a natural pork feast. You can order whatever you want." "You're the one who said it. Let me see. I want to eat stir-fried pork, pig head meat and—" Song Hama suddenly stopped thinking about delicacies. He had already discovered that something was wrong with his brother. "Guhan, why do I feel like you're not very happy? Are you jealous of me?" Song Hama slapped his head hard. He finally realized where he had gone wrong. "Brother, I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything else. I just wanted to share something with you. I forgot about your situation. I'm a bastard, I deserve to die, I don't know what's good for me." "It's none of your business, Toad." Guhan sighed. "As your brother, I'm happy that you've become a real sword wielder. It's my fault. I shouldn't have let my emotions get to me." To be honest, Guhan was indeed happy that Song Hama could become a sword wielder. However, when he thought of his pitiful 9 quarks of innate sword elements and the fact that it would take him at least 5 years to accumulate 9,000 quarks of innate sword elements in the game before he could barely reach 100 quarks of innate sword elements in reality, how could Guhan be happy? This was especially so when Song Hama, who was just a normal person like Guhan, suddenly ran over and told him excitedly that he had become a sword wielder. How many people would be able to understand such a sorrowful feeling? Ding! You have a new message. Please check. This new message was not from Guhan, but from Song Hama. Song Hama's expression changed when he heard the message that was sent directly to his ear. He said to Guhan, "Guhan, I have some urgent matters to attend to. You should go back first. I'll look for you at night and we'll go for Starbucks." "Alright, don't lie to me. What urgent matters could you have? You came looking for me and left in such a hurry. What are you hiding from me? Stinky Toad, don't forget what we said when we became sworn brothers." Guhan pressed down on Song Hama's shoulder. He was so strong that Song Hama found it difficult to even move a single step. Say it. That's what you wanted me to say." Song Hama pushed the blame to Guhan. "I just received a message from the Sword-Bearer's Service Center. After I found out that I broke through 200 quarks of innate sword elements, I made an appointment for a constitution test at the Service Center. The message told me to rush to the Service Center within an hour to undergo the system's body test. If I pass, I can proceed with the sword inscription ceremony directly." "That's good news." Guhan tried his best to smile. "Why did you hide it from me? I was afraid that you couldn't take the shock of this news and—" Song Hama muttered softly. How could I not take the shock of this news?" Guhan's grip on Song Hama's shoulder tightened. Song Hama's face instantly had a smile that was uglier than crying. Song Hama suddenly felt that his head must have been bitten by a dog. That was why he came looking for Guhan, that damn pervert. "Hey, you came looking for me because you wanted me to accompany you to participate in this test and ceremony, right?" Guhan's smile was still bright. "No. Absolutely not. How could I dare to trouble Master Guhan? I'll go myself. Song Hama's expression was even more fake than a lie. "Don't stand on ceremony. It's every best friend's job to experience the most important moment of their lives with their best friend. Let's go to the subway station. I remember the service center is quite far from here." "Okay. Haha. As long as you're happy." What else could Song Hama say? Just accept your fate. The Sword-Bearer's Service Center was located in the center of the super base city, Yuzhong City. Apart from the outermost super-large dimensional wall that covered the entire base city, there was a second, more powerful dimensional wall in the core area where the Sword-Bearers Service Center was located. In other words, this was the safest place in the entire base city. The core area was directly under the management of the Yuzhong City Council. The entire city's management system and sword-bearers, as well as the most precious sword pavilions and sword gardens, were located there. Apart from that, all the sword-bearers' family members lived in the core area, enjoying a safer living environment and special allowances and care from the council. This was a benefit that only sword-bearers could enjoy. Due to the additional layer of dimensional wall, the outer walls of the base city had been breached countless times in previous major attacks. However, there were very few records of breaching the wall in the core area. Gohan had imagined many times that if Gohan's parents had been able to live in the core area back then, they would have been able to survive the major attack safely. Unfortunately, this was all just a fantasy. Gohan's family had not produced a sword-bearer for hundreds of years. It was impossible for them to get a place to live in the core area. The Sword-Bearers Service Center was the second largest building in the entire core area. The only building bigger than it was the Yuzhong City Council, the highest authority of human power. In terms of the building's appearance, the Sword-Bearers Service Center was based on the architectural style of a certain Great Hall of the People from 1,000 years ago. However, it was enlarged by about 10 times. It had a Sword-Bearers Test Center, a Sword-Bearers Assessment Center, a Sword-Bearers Trading Center, a Sword-Bearers Adjustment Center, a Sword-Bearers Training Center, a Sword-Bearers Management Center, a Sword-Bearers Medical Center, and more than 10 key departments such as the Sword Pavilions and Sword Gardens. Tens of thousands of sword-bearers went to the Sword-Bearers Service Center every day. Song Hama first had to go to the Sword-Bearers Test Center to confirm that his sword element exceeded 200 quartz. Only then could he enter the Sword-Bearers Assessment Center to take the test. After confirming that he had a complete foundation and comprehensive knowledge of sword-bearers, he would get a chance to enter the sword pavilions and find an unawakened sword mistress to carry out a sword inscription ritual. After that, he would have to synchronize. Song Hama was already quite familiar with the entire process. This was not his first time coming to the Sword-Bearers Service Center. He had already been here twice before this. Previously, it was mentioned that the minimum sword element requirement for a sword-bearer to carry out synchronization was 100 quartz. When Song Hama was 13 years old, his innate sword element value had already grown to 100 quartz. Unfortunately, at that time, Song Hama had tried to synchronize with a powerful ancient sword-rank sword mistress without knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. In the end, he had failed miserably and lost his first chance to become a sword-bearer. Some people found this strange. Didn't they say that there were many ancient sword-rank sword mistresses? If this one did not succeed, they could just change to another one and try synchronization a few more times. Why was it that after failing once, they had completely lost their chance? This was not logical, and it was not conducive to finding more sword-bearers. To explain, before synchronization, the sword-bearer's body had to go through a sword inscription ritual. This was because the sword inscription ritual could increase the success rate of synchronization between the sword-bearer and the sword mistress by a few hundred times. This was a process that had to be experienced before synchronization. Otherwise, relying on synchronization alone would not have a success rate of more than 0.1%. It would take a long time before a sword-bearer with their own sword mistress could be born. However, the famed sword inscription ritual was expensive and time-consuming. In addition, almost every day, there were hundreds of mortals who had reached the standard who tried to synchronize with the sword mistress. Therefore, if everyone tried to synchronize with every unawakened sword mistress, the resources consumed would be too much for the council to bear. Therefore, after a scientific discussion, the council decided that every mortal who reached 100 quarts of sword element would have a chance to hold a sword inscription ritual for free. After that, for every increase of 50 quarts, they would get another free chance. If the sword mistress exceeded 500 quarts and still could not succeed, then the council would no longer provide a chance to hold a sword inscription ritual for free. Of course, if you have enough wealth, you can buy it for 100,000 renminbi once. It's a fair deal. You could experiment with all the sword mistresses in the sword library until you found one that could synchronize with your bloodline. By the way, according to estimates, 95% of mortals who had more than 100 quarts of sword element would not be able to synchronize with the existing sword mistresses successfully. Otherwise, there would be more than a few 100,000 sword-bearers among the billions of humans. Chapter 45. Name: Song Hama. Age: 18 years and 1 month. Gender: male. Ancestral home: Yuzhong City. Serial number of the people: 36010329831014246176927. How many times have you come for the test? This is the third time. I just got 205 quarks from the coin-operated automatic sword essence detector today. The automatic detector still has a 3% error. Someone will bring you to the system later. Let me ask you again. Are there any sword-bearers among your ancestors? My great-grandfather was a treasured sword-wielder. My great-grandmother was an ancient sword-wielder. Other than that, there are 3 other sword-bearers in my family tree. Oh, you can be considered a sword-bearer family. Do you know which sword maidens your ancestors had? When you choose later, it's best to choose these sword maidens. I only know that my great-grandfather's ancient sword-wielder was the Frost Iron Sword, and my great-grandmother's was the Autumn Moon Sword. However, I failed the last 2 times I tried to synchronize them. They didn't approve of me. Seems like the bloodline is too diluted. Then, in the Sword Maidens game, did you synchronize the ancient sword-wielder? But since you've only been in the game for a month, you should still be using the initial sword-wielder, right? Hee, I was lucky to get a chance to synchronize with the cloud-casting Iron Lady. Is it natural or artificially forged? Natural. Tisk tsk. The cloud-casting Iron Lady is one of the top 200 sword maidens in the ancient sword record. Since you've obtained the recognition of the cloud-casting Iron Lady in the game, your chances of success in real life have doubled. You should choose the cloud-casting Iron Lady for the sword inscription ceremony. I think so too. I just hope that the cloud-casting Iron Lady won't be taken away by other sword-bearers. It's a pity that my computer can't get any information from the sword tower. But don't worry, you can ask the service staff of the sword tower later. Song Hama's conversation was with the registrar of the Sword Bearer Testing Center. After recording Song Hama's information on an old-fashioned piece of paper, the registrar used an electronic pen to tap on the personal terminal on Song Hama's wrist. All right, the information has been entered into your personal terminal. You can go to room 32 and retest your sword essence value. Then, bring me the test report, the registrar instructed. Hey, pretty lady, can I ask if my friend who came with me can enter the examination room? Otherwise, I'm afraid he'll be bored staying here alone. Song Hama sincerely called the registrar, whose face was full of pimples, a beauty which made the other party smile happily. No problem. Go ahead. The inspector at number 32 is a reasonable person. Although the rules don't allow it, Bat can't monitor our service center. When Song Hama and Gohan arrived at room 32, there was no one inside. The reasonable inspector was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps he had gone to the toilet. However, Song Hama didn't know if the inspector had gone to the toilet. Anyway, he suddenly felt a pain in his abdomen. After waiting for a minute and not seeing the inspector return, he couldn't help but rush into the toilet. Gohan found the only chair in the examination room and sat down. The battle in the game had consumed a lot of Gohan's energy. After exiting the game, he was dragged here by Song Hama. The mentally exhausted Gohan couldn't help but close his eyes the moment his butt touched the soft chair and fell into a dreamland. A few minutes later, a girl with a lot of freckles on her cheeks walked into the examination room. She was the examiner of this examination room. Last night, she and her friends had spent the whole night in the dungeon. Today, her mental state was not very good. When she went to the toilet just now, she actually fell into a deep sleep. If it wasn't for her personal terminal constantly sending work reminders to her, she would still be sitting on the toilet and snoring away. "Friend, get up for the examination!" The freckled lady shouted and realized that the other party didn't respond. She must be like me. She's too tired from playing the game for too long. The freckled lady guessed. She thought that the other party was the same as her and had fallen into a deep sleep because of exhaustion. She couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy for the other party. Forget it. The examination doesn't need him to stay awake anyway. I'll just let him sleep like this. The freckled lady was indeed a reasonable child. Because she couldn't bear to wake the person being examined, she violated the work standards and began the examination in a sleeping state. The chair that Gohan made was the only chair in the examination room. He didn't know what the chair represented, so he sat down in a daze and fell asleep. As a result, with the freckled lady's control, 2 automatic flying scanning machines with gravitational wave scanners flew out from the ground under the chair. They emitted gravitational waves that couldn't be seen, touched, or felt, and circled Gohan's body dozens of times. Through the scanning, they constantly transmitted the data from Gohan's body to the computer in the freckled lady's hand. I didn't expect this person's physical fitness to be so good. The explosive power of his muscles is so high, higher than many famous sword wielders. The girl summarized the data and exclaimed in admiration, "Huh, that's strange. Didn't the information that was sent say that his sword element value should be 205 quarks after the automatic detection machine's detection? Why is there such a big difference?" Seeing the huge difference in the sword element value data on the computer, the freckled lady was extremely surprised. Even the freckles on her face seemed to have grown a lot bigger. Could it be that I've encountered the 1 in a million error rate of the fully automatic coin-operated machine? I'm so lucky. Lucky my A**s. What kind of luck is this? So cool. So cool. My whole body feels so relaxed. Song Hama, who had freed her stomach, returned to the examination room happily. She didn't know what was going on. She stared blankly at Gohan sitting on the examination chair that was supposed to have been made by her, and there were 2 scanning machines flying around him. Could it be that the person who had come to examine the sword element value was not her, but Gohan? "Hey, you're this Song Hama's friend, right? Where did your friend get the automatic detector? I'm going to inform the people in the Public Facilities Maintenance Department to replace the detector. Speaking of which, the detected difference is so big. I'm afraid it can't be fixed in a short time." The freckled girl nagged. "That's right. That." Song Hama smiled awkwardly. "I think the automatic examination machine might not be broken. It's the test subject that's broken." "It's not broken. He's just asleep." The freckled lady still didn't understand the situation. What I mean is, I'm Song Hama." What did you say?" "I'm Song Hama. Let me faint for a while." The freckled lady really wanted to find a hole in the ground to crawl into. She really did find a hole. This hole led straight to the fallout shelter that was 10 kilometers underground. It was the best place to use as an ostrich. "Don't crawl in. If you crawl in, who's going to test my sword element value for me?" Song Hama quickly grabbed the freckled lady's hand and pulled her out of the hole. "Ugh. You have to promise me that you won't tell a third person about this. And your friend definitely won't tell a fourth person about this." the freckled lady said while sobbing. Suddenly, she realized that there were many things she could complain about in her word. No problem, I promise you. Song Hama patted her chest and promised. What about your friend? The freckled lady asked worriedly. Don't worry. My friend and I are on the same side. He promises that he won't tell anyone about this. Song Hama immediately promised on behalf of Gohan. All right, I'll destroy this information and create a new one for you. The freckled lady immediately smiled through her tears. She sat back in front of the computer and pulled up the information she had just entered, preparing to delete it. Ugh, let me see if my little Gohan has gained some weight. I feel like he's already 5 kilograms heavier than me. Song Hama looked at the information on the computer screen maliciously. She had only planned to pay attention to the weight, but she suddenly saw a shocking number. Stop! Song Hama grabbed the freckled lady's hand that was about to click delete to confirm and shouted, Don't delete it first. Wait a minute, wait a minute. With that, Song Hama flew to Gohan's side and slapped Gohan's head hard. Bad news. Gohan. Bad news. Chapter 46. What's the big deal this time? Gohan felt the pain in his head. If there's nothing big, you're dead meat. There's no time to explain. Hurry up and take a look at this. Song Hama grabbed Gohan's hand and pulled him from the chair to the computer screen. Look at it yourself. What's there to look at? What's there to look at? Although that was what he said, Gohan still looked at the data sheet honestly. He also discovered the problem with the sword element value. His expression instantly became serious and cautious. This isn't right. Song Hama, why is your sword element value so different from 200 quarks? Is the automatic detector broken? It's still not right. Gohan was even more confused. Didn't you already hold the 150 quarks sword inscription ceremony last time? Why isn't there even 150 quarks this time? Could it be that after a few years your sword element value has actually decreased? Decrease your sister. Do you think this is my, Song Hama's, test report? Song Hama knocked Gohan's head again. If it's not yours, then whose? Isn't your name written on it? Gohan clearly saw Song Hama's name written on the name column on the form. Just because my name is written on it, it must be my test report? Who was the guy who was sitting on the test chair just now? Song Hama said indignantly. Test chair? Gohan turned his head and looked at the only chair in the room that he had just sat on. His heart skipped a beat as if he had understood something. His voice gradually trembled. Are you saying that the chair I was sitting on was the test chair? That's right. That's the test chair. This test report is actually mine? Gohan swallowed deeply. My butt hasn't even touched that chair. If it's not yours, then whose is it? Song Hama said. Then this sword element value number. This number. Gohan stretched out his trembling finger and pointed at the column showing the sword element value number on the screen. His whole body began to tremble. This number is Gohan's? It's yours. Sour popsicles. This is yours. Song Hama could not contain his excitement. He laughed out loud with an exaggerated expression. Sour popsicle, you did it! You did it! You can become a sword wielder. You can really become a sword bearer. Gohan was so excited that he didn't even know how to speak. On the screen, in the column of sword elements, the number of 110 sword elements was extremely dazzling and eye-catching. It had been 12 years. It had been 12 years. The goal that Gohan had fought for 12 years and he thought he had completely failed, had suddenly appeared in front of him in an extremely sudden and ridiculous way. Gohan had somehow reached the minimum requirement of a sword wielder, 100 quarks of sword elements. 3 days ago, when he left the Instance Dungeon Settlement Center, when he found out that he did not obtain the 10,000 quarks of sword elements from the King of Yu's Gojin sword, when he was lying on his bed, Thinking of giving up on being an ordinary person, when the sword lady was reprimanding him, Gohan decided to accept the fact that he had failed. He accepted the fact that his 12 years of planning had gone up in smoke. He accepted the fact that he still needed to struggle for another 5 years or more. Gohan even came up with a grand plan to reach 9,000 quarks of sword elements in the shortest time possible. Life is always filled with wonderful surprises, isn't it? To suddenly find out that the goal that he had been dreaming of, the goal that he had estimated to take 5 or 10 years to achieve, had suddenly been accomplished at a certain point in time. What kind of indescribable feeling would that be? Gohan did not know. At that moment, he could no longer think rationally. He had sunk into a state of uncontrollable ecstasy. At that moment, he wished he could throw everyone and everything he could see high into the air. He wanted to throw them with all his might into the air to release the joy that he had nowhere to release. Fortunately, Gohan, who had grown up with a heavy burden of hatred, was not so easily defeated by joy. He resisted the urge to throw Song Hama into the air and let him fall to the ground without a care. To be on the safe side, Gohan decided to let the freckled girl test his sword element value again. What if the device also made a mistake? The freckled girl expressed her disdain for this. In the hundreds of years since the release of this professional detector for scientific research, there had been no more than 100 accidents. Among these 100 accidents, human error accounted for more than 90% of them. How could it possibly test Gohan's sword element value incorrectly? Still, our freckled girl was a reasonable and kind person. She obediently checked Gohan's stats again. There was no mistake. It was still 110 quarks of sword element. Gohan had indeed reached the most basic standard for a sword wielder. After confirming it, it was finally Song Hama's turn to test his sword element. After being mercilessly cut in line by Gohan twice, it was finally his turn to complete the test. After a precise and meticulous professional test, Song Hama's sword element value was finally determined to be 204 quark. It was 1 quark less than the 205 quarks of the automatic coin-operated sword element detector on the street. This was an acceptable margin of error. When he turned around, the excited Gohan went to the front desk to apply for the first sword inscription ceremony in his life. He was actually assigned to the same registrar as Song Hama. Therefore, after the registrar completed the test procedures for Song Hama, he also helped Gohan with the sword element test. He complained to Gohan over and over again that since the two of them had come together, why didn't they go through the procedures together from the start? As a result, he had to do it again. What was even more coincidental was that Gohan was also assigned to test room 32. Just when the freckled girl thought that the trouble of the day was finally over and that she would never have to see these two troublesome fellows again, she was dumbfounded to see them swaggering in and waving at her. "Damn it, I'm not that close to you, okay?" The freckled girl could only helplessly ask Gohan to sit on the test chair for the 3rd time and do the test for him again. Thus, Gohan became the only sword bearer in test room 32 to have his sword element tested 3 times in one day. Many years later, Gohan, who had already achieved success and become a big boss of the human race, told Song Hama this interesting story in an interview program. Test room 32 instantly became a famous tourist attraction. Countless sword bearers tried their best to enter this test room to have their sword element tested. It became a super tourist attraction that earned millions of yuan a month. The sword bearer test was a necessary step before the sword inscription ceremony. It mainly tested whether the sword bearer had mastered the most basic knowledge. Generally speaking, the test center of the sword bearer service center wouldn't open the test for just anyone. Only after there were 10 sword bearers who needed to be tested would the test be conducted as a group. When Gohan completed the test procedures and arrived at the waiting area of the test center with Song Hama, there was only one female candidate sitting there waiting. It seemed like Gohan and Song Hama were unlucky. The previous batch of 10 people had probably just entered the examination hall, and they would need to wait for a while before the next batch of 10 candidates could be gathered. While waiting for the exam, Gohan still could not believe that he had actually arrived at the entrance of the assessment center. He was about to hold his first sword inscription ceremony in his life. All of this happened too suddenly. How did he, who only had 9 quarks of sword elements a few days ago, suddenly have 110 quarks? Gohan decided to think about it carefully. If he couldn't figure out the reason behind it, Gohan might not even be able to sleep. First of all, he had been tested by the fully automatic coin-operated sword element detector 3 days ago. If the detector had not been broken, then he would have been a pitiful person with 9 quarks 3 days ago. The changes had happened in the past 3 days. The answer to this question was hidden in the events that had happened in the past 3 days. Gohan carefully recalled and speculated that the following points were the possible reasons for the strange increase in his sword element value. First, he had completed an SSS grade evaluation for the initial battle instance dungeon. Second, he had grafted the Gojian Sword of the King of You, but it was cancelled by the GM. Then, he was sent back by that strange 0791 by twisting his egg. Third, he had obtained the mysterious Chinpin sword. Fourth, he had participated in the Jinyuan Garrison Crusade quest and completed a new quest storyline that had never been heard of before. Fifth, he had eaten several sword element pills during the quest, drank a bottle of sword element oral solution, obtained the secret manual of the Heavenly Sword and the cornucopia. The fifth and fourth possibilities were first ruled out by Gohan. The changes to the mission's plot had nothing to do with the sword essence's value. As for eating a few sword essence pills, that was even more impossible. According to the conversion rate of 9 out of 1,000, 9,000 quarks would be needed to achieve it. With the 500 quarks of sword essence he had so far, he could at most convert 1 quark. Wait, if the 500 quarks of sword element value obtained in the game were converted into 1 quark of sword element value in the real world, then unsurprisingly, the sword element value he should have was 10 quarks. Among the 110 quarks, there were 100 quarks that appeared out of thin air. 100 quarks divided by his conversion rate of 0.9/1000 would be equivalent to obtaining 9,000 quarks of sword element value in the game. If the various losses during the conversion process were taken into account, then the actual sword element value needed in the game was actually around 10,000 quarks. It was exactly the same as the 10,000 quarks that he had lost and the 10,000 quarks of sword element that he should have obtained after the sword mark of the Gojian Sword of the King of You. Could it be that the 10,000 quarks did not disappear, but directly entered my body in the real world? Gohan silently speculated. A seemingly correct answer appeared in his mind. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.